Good evening, everyone. Let's make a start. It's Tuesday, the 17th of August, 2021. It's just after 6 p.m. Sorry for the slightly late start. I'd like to welcome you all, obviously, here. We start by acknowledging the Whadjuk people, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay our respects to elders, both past and present. May I ask everyone present this evening to turn off electronic devices, particularly mobile phones, iPads and tablets for the duration of the meeting, as these devices often interfere with our audio recording equipment. This particular meeting, I'm happy to say, is being live streamed on the city's website for the first time. The audio is being live streamed. Can we just keep the noise down, Councillor, please? You've interrupted me already in the meeting, so could you just please keep the noise down? By being present at this meeting, members of the public consent to the possibility that their voice is being live streamed to the public over the city's website. The remainder of the disclaimer this evening can be seen on the screen. I understood there were some students coming from Fountain College. They haven't yet arrived, but they may at some stage. At item 2, attendance, the full council is here. Apologies, there are no apologies at item 2.1. Approved leave of absence, there is none. Disclosures of interest, declarations of interest at item 3. I might ask the CEO, Stephen Kane, to please read those to the meeting.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have 2 declarations of interest tonight. The first is from Councillor Sweeney in regard to CC 03921. It is an impartiality declaration. The second is from Mayor Hall in regard to notice of motion 00721. It too is an impartiality declaration.
Thank you, and just for the purpose of the meeting, we have had a number of students and teachers turn up from Fountain College. Welcome to you. Welcome to this meeting. Announcement by the presiding member at item 4, there is none. Reports of delegates without discussion. Do any elected members wish to present a delegates report this evening? No, thank you. We move on. Question time for the public at item 6.1, response to previous questions that were taken on notice. There are none. Public question time. 15 minutes is set aside, which may be extended if necessary for recording purposes. I'd ask anyone wishing to ask a question to please state your name and address and then proceed to ask your question. If an answer cannot be provided at tonight's meeting, the question will be taken on notice and an answer will be provided at the next ordinary council meeting. In accordance with policy AD02, members of the public who have registered their questions with the city's administration will be called upon in the order in which registrations were received. Written questions will precede verbal questions. The city has received questions for tonight's meeting from Mr. Steve Walker. Mr. Walker, are you present? Would you like to step up, just identify yourself to the meeting and start? In public question time, it's now 6:05 p.m. Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mayor Patrick Hall. Steve Walker, 22 Farnham Street, Bentley. Question 1. Why did City of Canning not contact me, submitter to 2020 local law review via the mailing address or email address provided on my 19th of August 2020 effort?
CEO, actually I've got Mr. Bride. Are you able to respond to Mr. Walker's question? Director
Yes.
Bride.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. At the March 2021 Council meeting, your 2020 submission, including that on the fencing local law, was considered by Council. The City sent an email on the 27th of April 2021 to the 2020 submitters. The email included an email address designated for you within the City's records, and that email did not return to sender.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Your next question? The City is saying that an email was sent.
Question 2. Was it not foreseeable that I would have wanted to be notified by either of those 2 valid methods in regards to finalisation of the proposed new local laws in 2021, and that I would have provided public comment if I had known my comments weren't to be rolled over into further additional consultation?
Mr. Bride, are you able to provide a response to that? And I wonder, just in the on the basis that Mr. Walker says that he didn't, it appears that he may not have received the City's response in April. Are we able to resend it to him, nevertheless, after the fact?
Certainly can do that, Mr Mayor. And in response to question 2, Your comments were considered by Council as part of its 2021 March resolution. The City has followed its statutory consultation requirements under the Local Government Act 1995 when making local laws, which included providing statewide and local public notice, exhibition of the local laws at the City's administration building and library, publication on the City's Your Say webpage, and providing messages on the opportunity to comment via social media posts. It should also be noted that the local laws advertised during the 2021 consultation period had minor changes and were almost identical to the laws presented in 2020. The Act requires the re-advertising of local laws where changes are made, although it is noted they are of a minor nature.
Mr Walker, do you have a final question?
Yes.
Did you want that email resent to you from April? No? Yes?
I gave a mailing address. I gave an email address.
That's okay, but did you want it resent or not?
Hey, send it.
Terrific, okay. Your final question?
Question 3. In regards to residential overheight fences needing administrative approval from City of Canning, give detail from 2017 to 2019 of total numbers per individual suburb, plus whether they were existing homes or new builds or rebuilds, existing owners or new owners, occupiers or investors.
Director Bride.
The City has issued 21 overheight fence approvals between 2017 and 2021, comprising 1 in Canning Vale, 1 in Cannington, 2 in East Cannington, 2 in Ferndale, 2 in Linwood, 1 in Riverton, 2 in Rossmoyne, 1 in Shelley, 1 in St James and 8 in Willetton. The vast majority, if not all of these, were related to existing houses, existing homes.
Thanks very much for coming along, Mr Walker. Appreciate it. Got questions here on my list from Marnie Aldridge and Richard Aldridge. Mrs Aldridge.
Excuse me. Good evening, Mr Mayor, Councillors, CEO Kane, Directors and those in the public gallery. My name is Marnie Aldridge and I live at Minota Avenue in Shelley. At last month's OCM, I attempted to ask a question which I felt I need now to rephrase. Yes, I incorrectly said budget meeting when it was a warrant listing, and I used the term private detective instead of private investigator. So fair enough, detecting, investigating, potato, potato. Councillor Barry put in on the 15th of June a question about a warrant listing and it was put on notice. So I could probably assume that it was 2 months ago that an answer was given to him, so I'm hoping this will not be put on notice. So through you, Mr Mayor, could Acting CEO Kane please answer the question that, can you please explain what the warrant listing private investigator warrant listing 033401 supplier 12532 for Shane Hogan for audit and assurance services for the amount of $3,666.96 using ratepayers' money was used for?
You realise that matter is being discussed by Council tonight. There's a notice of motion from Councillor Barry.
Yes.
You know that?
Yes.
So outside of that Council decision, you'd like your own.
So you're going to be discussing it tonight and what it was for?
Have you not read the agenda for tonight?
I've read part of the agenda.
Have you read the
but
notice
I'm
of
actually
motion
asking
from Councillor
what
Barry?
it's for.
Have you read the notice of motion from Councillor Barry?
I'm hoping that you'll be discussing what it was for, yes.
That's not what I asked you, but Director, can you able to provide an answer for Mrs Aldridge? Oh, sorry, CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I refer to the item tonight, which is Notice of Motion 00721, which provides advice that when the City initiates any form of investigation, the details of that remain confidential and not disclosed.
So would they be
Second question.
So would this be confidential to councillors or just ratepayers?
Thank you for your second question. CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Confidentiality provisions which apply under Section 5123 of the Local Government Act apply to all and not just councillors, apply to staff and members of the public.
And your final question,
Okay.
Mrs Aldridge.
So can the CEO please reassure ratepayers that at no time that any of the City of Canning has used private investigators to investigate any of the elected members?
CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I can simply state that it is not a function of the administration to initiate investigations which may fall under the jurisdiction of the Crime and Misconduct Act or the Local Government Act in regard to standards panel complaints.
Okay.
Thank you, Mrs Aldridge.
Pleased to hear.
Mr Aldridge.
Richard Aldridge, 5 Monota Avenue in Shelley. Good afternoon, Council, Mr Mayor, Directors. Excuse my short preamble. It's come to my attention that an email sent by Director Gary Adams on the 22nd of December 2020 has recently been leaked. This email was CC'd only to the councillors and the directors, and one of these recipients has leaked this information. The contents of that email have been edited and republished along with other slanderous material and sent to an unknown number of Rossmoyne, Riverton and Shelley Ratepayer Association members. That letter is signed...
I'll just get you to ask your question, please.
Sure. That letter is signed by Wayne Teo, Pat Coffey and Vicky Thomas. My question is, will the CEO request an investigation by the CCC or the Department of Local Government under section 5.93 regarding this clear and blatant misuse of government information?
As CEO, you're able to take the question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If a formal complaint is lodged with the City in accordance with the details contained on our website, it will always be dealt with, either sent through to the appropriate party for investigation if it's relevant, or at least looked at from the City's perspective.
Your second question, Mr Aldridge?
I'm seeking Director Kane's advice or the Governor's advice because I don't know which member of council leaked the information.
You're alleging that a member of council, you want to be very careful about making an allegation of that nature in an open forum.
It is either a member of council or a member of the directors, because that was the only two people that this email was CC'd to, and I'm happy to bring in the details tomorrow. My advice...
If you're going to make a complaint, I think you should make a complaint. I don't think you should be making unfounded claims in an open meeting, in a public forum. You'd be aware of... I don't need to counsel you on legal obligations, but be very careful what you're about to say, Mr Aldridge. So if you have a question, ask it.
My question is, how am I best going about triggering an investigation on this?
I'm not sure it's up to the CEO to provide advice to you, but I'll ask him to address your question in broad terms.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Aldridge, I could refer you to the Crime and Corruption Commission's website, which has a process by which any allegation of serious misconduct can be lodged. You would have to provide all necessary documents directly to them, and it would be up for the Crime and Corruption Commission to make a decision as to whether it's going to investigate the matter or not.
Thank you. Final question, Mr Aldridge.
Thank you. My final question is along the... Well, it's actually identical to my wife's question, and that is, has the City of Canning ever investigated or paid for a private investigator to investigate a elected member?
And since that question has already been
answered... It wasn't answered. Just a simple yes or no,
I won't have you argue with me, Mr Aldridge. Sit down. You've asked your question. I'm ruling it out of order. You've asked the question. You just said it was identical to your wife's question. It's been
well, no, I'm requesting a yes or no answer.
Sit down, Mr Aldridge. I'm asking you to sit down. If you won't sit down, I'll ask you to leave. Thank you. Are there any other questions from the public gallery? Thank you, everyone. We'll close public question time at 6:17 p.m. Thank you. We'll move to the confirmation of minutes. So the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held on the 20th of July 2021 be confirmed as circulated. The recommendation, councillors, on page 2 of the agenda and now appears on screen. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? A mover, Councillor Bain, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Sweeney, thank you. Councillors, let's put the matter to the vote.
Councillor Holland, I don't have your vote. The motion to confirm the minutes from the July OCM has been carried unanimously. It's 11 in favour.
Thank you, Governance. We move to item 8 on tonight's agenda, receiving of petitions, presentations and deputations. At item 8.1, petitions, we have a petition from a Miss A. Peebles of Tia Place in Willetton. The City received a petition containing 14 verified elector signatures from Miss A. Peebles regarding the placement of a left turn only exit sign at the drive-through Kiss and Go area at Rostrata Primary School on Glenmoy Avenue in Willetton. The prayer of which reads, "We, being citizens of the City of Canning, hereby petition that the Council will take note of the wishes of we the citizens insofar as we request." This is a petition for a left turn only sign exit point at the drive-through Kiss and Go area at Rostrata Primary School on Glenmoy Avenue. We have found that parents, caregivers at Rostrata Primary School do not give way to us coming out of Tia Place, which can be and will be dangerous and cause an accident. There is also the shopping centre entry exit right next to the school area and directly across from Tia Place. Will also help ease the congestion of people turning right out of this area and then going on to Rostrata Avenue, as it already is congested both ways as parents try to enter the drive-through Kiss and Go from both directions on Rostrata Avenue, or people says existing, but it would be exiting the Rostrata Shopping Centre car park, as neither people give way out of these areas. End of quote. The recommendation, councillors, is on the screen that the petition be received and referred to the CEO for action. The recommendation is on page 3 of the agenda and is on the screen right now. Can I have a mover, please, for that petition? Thank you, Councillor Holland, and also Councillor Ponaturai has seconded that. We put the matter to the vote.
Petition 1 has been carried unanimously with 11 in favour.
I've received a second petition, appears to be from the same person, Miss A. Peebles, Tia Place in Willetton. We, being citizens of the City of Canning, hereby petition the Council will take note of the wishes of the citizens as we request to elevate the issue of illegal and dangerous parking by parents at the adjacent Rostrata Primary School, and to make it easier and safer for us residents and our visitors to be able to enter and exit Tia Place safely. We propose to install no parking signs on each corner of Tia Place and Glenmoy Avenue, with school hours only between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. and 4 p.m, with the arrows to be pointing towards Glenmoy Avenue so we can still have guests park in our street during these hours if need be. End of quote. The recommendation is on screen that the petition be referred to the CEO for action. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Ponaturai, thank you. Seconder. Councillor Sabiri has seconded it. Councillors, can we put the matter to the vote?
Petition 2 has been carried unanimously, 11 in favour.
Thank you. We have a number of deputations this evening, councillors, at item 8.3. The first deputation is from a Miss Butner regarding EN 014 of 21. Miss Butner, can I ask you to please come forward and make your deputation? Thank you. I apologise if I've butchered your surname. I didn't intend to. You have up to 10 minutes to make your deputation. Please just introduce yourself to the council and speak into the microphone, which will be out on in just a jiffy. There it is.
No worries. Can you
Thank
hear me
you.
like this already, or do I have to press the button?
No, it's on
okay.
right
Okay.
now.
Thank you so much for having me tonight. My name is Frederica Butner. I'm from Strata Green. In case you don't know Strata Green, it's a local supplier in Canning Vale to the landscaping, horticulture and environmental industries. And my deputation tonight is about the fact that we would like to kindly ask for your approval to plant 1 commemorative tree and 10 additional trees in support of your urban forest strategy. And it's our anniversary this year. It's the 20th anniversary of Strata Green, and we've been in the city of Canning Vale, or the city of Canning, for 20 years now. And we wanted to come up with something special this year, and we're brainstorming what we could do, and the idea we had was to plant trees. Our business slogan is also grow with us, so we thought the best idea would just be to plant trees. So tonight we'd just kindly like to ask for your approval. We'd like to plant them in a local area that we could also use it for our team meetings, to go there together, have our team events, barbecues, and so on. And over the course of time, over the next 10 or 20 years, hopefully as the business grows, we can see how much the tree grows as well. And on the other hand, of course, we would also like to use it to promote ourselves. We're going to have an anniversary event this year on October 22nd, and everyone's invited to join, visit Strata Green in Canning Vale on that day. And yeah, we're hoping that other businesses will follow suit, and possibly it's a good idea for other businesses to get involved as well, to contribute to the greening of the community and contribute to your forest strategy, and which are your goals are also in line with our business's goals to reduce our carbon footprint. So we've been taking a few steps in that direction as well, and we've been working with local suppliers and businesses to reduce our carbon footprint so far, and we have achieved quite a bit so far, and this would just be the next milestone and next step, even though it's just a small step, but we know you need to take a step to go somewhere. So this is a nice point where we'd like to start. And yeah, we'd really appreciate if you could approve our project. And yeah, thank you so much. Let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much for coming along this evening. Look, I propose to bring that matter forward, so I think it can be dealt with fairly expediently, and I'll bring that forward early into the meeting for you if you're planning to stay around. Thank you for coming in, and congratulations on the 20-year anniversary of Strata Green. The second deputation has been approved for Mr. Serran regarding item CC 040 of 21. Mr. Serran, would you please make your way forward if you're here? Thank you very much. Just introduce yourself to the council, and similarly you have up to 10 minutes to make your deputation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the record, my name is Becca Serran from 21 Civic Gardens, Cunnington. I'd like to start by good evening to Mr. Mayor, yourself, the councillors, the Executive Committee, and the visitors in the public gallery. I would like to firstly thank the council, thank the city, for this opportunity to talk about our association and our plans. Thank you. Can we have it in the presentation mode? The actual display.
Yes, in terms of any discussions.
Just F5. Yep. Okay. So I've just got a couple of slides here. Again, we're an association which has been around for over 40 years, but unfortunately not well known, and due to primary to our purpose. So as part of this discussion, I just want to talk about who we are, what we do, just talk about the existing Hartfield Reserve, as well as our proposal for the park. Okay, who we are. So the Turkish Islamic Association was originally established in 1979, over 40 years ago, by most of our parents at that period. The mosque was actually built in 1984, and as such, basically the committees, so the committee is actually made up of men and females, which basically were born and bred in Canning. So the committee that we currently have actually lived most of their life in Canning. Again, they're very keen to see the actual, hopefully the Canning community thrive, as well as provide benefits or provide sort of services to the Canning region. So I can't seem to see the, sorry. So again, we're one of the largest ethnic organisations in Canning. We're located basically in corner of Westfield Road and Treasure Road, and in terms of our large ethnic group, we have a very diverse community. We have communities from almost all parts of the world coming to our mosque for religious purpose as well as social reasons. In terms of members, we have over 300 members, and in terms of the visitors that we get, over close to about 100 visitors a day, almost, even more, so using our facilities. Okay. Again, as mentioned, we cater for a diverse group of people in terms of Central Asia, Middle East, and on the Indian subcontinent, as well as other ethnic groups. So although the association is run by mainly Turkish people, the actual the facilities, the actual service we provide actually addresses a whole lot of communities. In terms of our subcommittees, we're predominantly made up of the ladies committee, the youth committee and the funeral committee. So in terms of our ladies committee, again, we've taken a lot of interest, a lot of focus, a lot of energy to build up the ladies community in the recent 4 years, and hopefully that's growing quite substantially. Okay. So in terms of how we benefit Canning, so from the census 2016, about 12% of the residents in Kennington are Muslims. As part of that, we see the main growth in that area. Again, one part of it is the mosque itself. It has drawn in a lot of public. It has drawn a lot of families around other neighbourhoods into the Canning city. So again, with that comes the benefits of actually helping the local businesses, helping in terms of providing more ethnic type of businesses within the Canning, which is contributing to the ethnic sort of diversity of Canning itself. In addition, locally, again, in terms of the local supermarkets, whether it's Bentley Plaza or Queen's Park Village, the 7-Eleven, IGA, we definitely provide a lot of, in terms of hopefully visitors to those sort of local businesses within our community. Yeah. So the service that we primarily deliver are religious and social services. Again, these include providing the facilities for prayers as well as meditation and spiritual sort of reflections. And yeah, so in terms of cultural, we do provide both Arabic, Turkish cultural education classes, Sunday classes for students and so forth. We do have an interfaith agenda as well in terms of communicating with other groups, other religious organisations, as well as secular organisations. Okay, so other services that we provide, again, family assistance, local and international fundraising, which I'll go into a little bit more detail, as well as women empowerment, leadership for youth year leadership, as well as birth, deaths and marriage ceremonies. Okay, so one of the international sort of fundraising we did recently is for the bushfire appeal. Basically, a number of Turkish sort of run mosques have collected over $14,000 for the bushfire appeal, and basically we contributed 3,200 of that to this appeal. So that a cheque was written to the Queensland Fire and Service in December 2019. Okay, Indonesia, in 2000 and I think it was 19, I can't remember exactly. Basically, when the earthquake happened in Indonesia, Lombok, we raised a campaign to actually raise money and also to personally, or to actually go to Indonesia and distribute food and essential needs. So it was pretty much organised by the association itself. We raised over $19,000. A couple of committee members, including myself, went to Indonesia at our own expense and distributed over 3 trucks full of rice for the victims the victims of the earthquake. Okay, more recently, we've raised money for the bushfires in Turkey, as well as the explosions in Lebanon. So over $5,000 of fundraising there as well. Okay. More recently, during the COVID pandemic, we distributed over $2,000 of Woolworth grocery cards. Again, and they weren't particularly Muslims or people in our community. They were pretty much strangers as well. Being a religious organisation, we do get a lot of non-Muslim visitors as well, in terms of pretty much when they come for need as well. So we've done that during the COVID period, where we've distributed grocery carts, as well as a couple of students which came into Australia as students and working, as part of their, helping their studies. Unfortunately, with the COVID, has actually basically made that not viable in terms of their work being sort of laid off and all that, and we provided rent assistance to those students. As well as, again, we have a lot of non-English speaking community members, and we provide pretty much a communication gap between the government's instructions to the non-English speaking families and community members. Okay, other events, again, we've done we run a national mosque day. We invite a lot of local and state officials to those events. It is quite a big event. Again, it just opens the door to the general public. Any questions or any sort of information that people want to understand or get from the mosques or the committees, or as well as the neighbouring. So during these events, we actually knock our neighbours' doors, as well as get their invite them as well to these events.
You've got about 40 seconds left. Just ask you to wind up. You've been speaking for about 10 minutes.
Sorry about that. Okay, so basically, Hartfield Reserve, it's divided into like two sections. And again, Hartfield Reserve is actually on our boundary of the mosque. So there's section A, which is predominantly, it's got lighting, it's got facilities there for us. And there's a sort of section B, which is pretty much enclosed in an area where it sees very little light. We have a lot of criminal activities in that area. Okay, some of these criminal activities, these are actual footages in 2021. We had hooning, we had someone doing hooning in that area, as well as our car park. Unfortunately, one of our community members got injured in this incident, where he tried to actually confront the culprit, and it ended up in hospital. Also, again, in terms of with finding a lot of needles, unused materials, as well as other items being dumped in this area. Again, more recently in 2020, the fire brigade was called in for an arson attack in that area as well.
I'm going to have to ask you to wind up. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
You've gone well over time. The good thing is that the council's been received a full report for tonight's motion, the recommendation of the council, which is a confidential report to council, but it's comprehensive, and I think we're all fully briefed on what it is that the mosque would actually would want from us. So council's fully appraised of our responsibility. So thank you for telling us a little bit more about your work in the community. It's very commendable, but we do have a number of people waiting behind you to make deputations, so I'm going to have to ask you to finish up there.
Okay.
All right.
10 seconds?
10 seconds.
Okay, so in terms of a proposal, again, we're not there to actually build houses or anything like that. What our proposal for the Hartfield, one section of the Hartfield area, is pretty much creating an environment for families, as well as for the general community too. So the actual proposal is to put a basketball court there, have some trees around that area, so that not just our community also is open to the general public. Again, which is pretty much a theme of our mosque, is we provide facilities not just for our community as well as the whole public. Yeah.
Thank you. That was about 10 and a half seconds.
Right. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming along. I'm sorry to have to wind you up. Appreciate you coming. Mr. Walker, I'll ask you to come forward again and just reintroduce yourself to the council. Mr. Walker's requested a deputation in relation to item CD 025 of 21. Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Steve Walker, 22 Farnham Street, Bentley. Deputation on item CD 02521, City of Canning Fencing Local Law. Reminder, March 2021, no real discussion at the agenda briefing or OCM. Ordinary council meeting dominated by one agenda item, Shelley Beach Master Plan. That is what most council members were focusing on and what the public's attention was being drawn to by council. Plus, I did stay that night till past the local law item till at least 10:54 p.m, in contrast to the main crowd. Yes, I was the only public submitted to the draft Local Law Fencing 2020, aside from the Department of Local Government. I can stress again, there was no contact to alert the public submitter of the agenda listing in late 2020, March 2021, April, August 2021. It was foreseeable that I would have wanted to be notified by the mail or email listed in the submitted effort in regards to finalisation of the local laws in 2021. I would have provided public comment if I'd known my comments weren't going to be rolled over into further additional consultation, let alone my 16th of March 2021 Ordinary Council meeting question 1 effectively stated that. It was foreseeable, thus expressing my concerns. Then, as for tonight, the Director has said a lot of the decision-making weight rested with Council in March 2021. Now, the email and mailing addresses were standard options for at least the past 8 years in regards to City of Canning requests for public submissions. I'd say it was reasonable for a public submitter to the Local Draft Laws 2020 process to have expected their efforts / comments will be rolled over into any other further consultation on the specific matter. The answer given to question 1 on March 2021 was by the Director, was proposing to recommence the advertising process, and any comments will come back to Council for consideration as part of the final adoption process. Now, I have seen this month the local laws discussion paper booklet at Cannington Library. It is nicely worded, though results need improvement, alteration. The proposed new fencing local law 2020. Schedule 2A, disagree. The maximum for residential should not be increased to 2.2 metres. It should stay at 1.8 metres, especially in those parts of suburbia that have essentially remained unchanged, single detached houses on low density residential piece of land. I would assume it's R30 and below. I also think it should apply to R40 zoned. If you want to change it for industrial lots or commercial lots, then fine, yet leave residential suburbia alone. Now, City of Canning website publicly last year was trying to say 2.2 metres high, something about red tape. Well, 2.2 metres high is not user friendly. It's quite adversarial, exclusionary, tribal, rude, imposing. Residential fences should not go beyond 1.8 metres. All the new Canning Vale residential estates in the 1990s, they all had 1.8 metre fences. Yet now there was nothing wrong with that. Now you want to change everything. Stop pretending that all over City of Canning is intense infill and that fence limits must increase. There is no need to change the local fencing law. Now, if there's any appetite for anyone to change anything, then maybe you should just go for the high density pockets of City of Canning, which would be the Canning City Centre redevelopment and the Queen's Park Town Centre redevelopment, where maybe stuff is in extreme close proximity. Now, City of Canning gave the excuse in the March 2021 submitted table of unnecessary approval. I say it is necessary. 1.8 metres is okay to stay as the maximum without approval. That could have been locked in, and there was no discussion at March 2021 Ordinary Council meeting. Reminder, City of Canning staff ignored my changes in the March 2021 item. They made references to taking the changes from the Department of Local Government and from WALGA, with that unviewable to the public, of course. No WALGA effort or template in the March 2021 attachment. Additionally, there was no discussion of side fencing, rear fencing at the August 2021 agenda briefing. Generally speaking, for 2020 and 2021, there has been non-discussion on residential fencing, commercial fencing, industrial fencing. The public wants real discussion by council members. Take on the advice, improve the proposed 2021 local law. Now to the current agenda item. Page 101, point 3D, consultation has also included emailing the original submitters that provided comments during the 2020 consultation period, notifying them of the consultation period. Exactly, original submitters. Now the intended agenda item doesn't draw attention to, but Schedule 2 specifications for a sufficient fence on a residential lot 1A, minimum 1.8 metres, maximum 2.2 metres, and Schedule 3 specifications for a sufficient fence on a commercial lot or an industrial lot 2A are the same. There is no difference among them. In the August item, there's no talk of industry negotiating. Clearly they are the ones doing it. Where is the acknowledgement of that? Don't hide it. Dare I say, many times the industry does the deciding. Sustainability, point 14, more metal, more panels, more brick, more stone, more timber, more raw materials, more cement, more metal posts. That is what is being encouraged and encouraged by your proposed local law, yet your current item still doesn't want to acknowledge it. Point 15, don't agree with best practice by WALGA. any notion of a WALGA template. It's not listed online by WALGA or City of Canning for the public to see, further adds to the unproven argument by City of Canning. Attachment 2, information summary on the Your Say Canning webpage. Very concerning, 2 discussion paper downloaded. 2. I think that should have been a real worry to council members reading the August 2021 agenda papers. Should have been a worry to staff in May and June. Clearly there was a failure in reaching out to the community. Heck, the COVID virus situation might have been a factor. Page 106, Department of Local Government submission. They got your proposed local law, not the March 2021 agenda item and not my submission to the 2020 proposed local law fencing. If so, you do not want them to see my effort. At the very least, the March 2021 agenda item would have revealed it. I wonder now if you are going to send them the August 2021 ordinary council meeting agenda item. No mention of that by any officer, yet has been indication from your discussion paper and your agenda item that after your anticipated total approval by council members, and you will be sending it to the approved new City of Canning 2021 local fencing law directly to the Minister and Joint Standing Committee and informing the Department of Local Government, you have done that. And they also said on page 107, it should not be taken as approval of consent. Now, in regards to fencing panels, aluminium, timber, plus other materials, builders upsell this stuff, how the industry of suppliers, manufacturers, builders, etc. upsize and upsell for the industry, how the additional profiteering has not been acknowledged, not spoken of. It's adding to costs, adding to unsustainability, increasing products, raw materials, how they've dumped huge amounts of landfill the past few decades, never held to account costs borne by the public, state government, the environment, animals, trees, plants, etc. Construction and demolition waste is Western Australia's and Perth's biggest waste category. In terms of aluminium or metal sheeting, high volume carbon emissions, very energy intensive to produce. Fencing companies exploit, like the McLarge Feast, they upsell pressure, exactly the same as the fast food industry. City of Canning staff gave into this upsizing lobby industry group. The industry group has tradespeople and they're all happy to rip out stuff, put new stuff in again, all around in a continuous circle of construction and demolition rubble. To the council members tonight, if you care for the environment, vote no to the existing local law. If you don't care for the environment, vote yes to the existing 2021 standards listed on pages 2099, Schedule 2 1A and Schedule 3 2A on page 100 of Attachment 1. Now, my third question from public question time tonight should have been asked by the council members, or staff should have placed in the item and discussion paper. How many approvals? Now we know for those 3 years, 2017, 2019 was 21. Now that's barely anything. Now there's a lot of variables in that, whether it's owner, occupiers, whether they're investors, whether they live, whether they reside interstate, whether they reside overseas. And I'll say the City of Canning knows all this information, they have it all, but they never want,
1 minute, Mr.
never want to share it. Overall, it's un-Australian. Somebody had to say it, it really is. Now, I thought the City of Canning had a policy of friendliness and inclusion, not exclusion, as this new local law indicates. There is no big burden of approvals. There's a lot of other variables. 1.8 metres is good for everyone, for solar, for wind, for a whole range of things. Plus, we cannot ignore the trend of much of society to stay in rooms, stare at devices and focus on large TV computer screens. They are not looking out and they're not looking out the window. Their attention is insular, the residential internal lives. Overall, if the current August 2021 new fencing local law item is voted through, it can appear that the council members comply with what staff say, yet there's been no detail. A lack of detail, dare I say, approvals are mostly done from the staff desks. In conclusion, lack of detail, no discussion, additional environmental impacts from additional material resources. The industry upsellers and exploiters, un-Australian, unfriendly and more, need to change Schedule 2 and Schedule 3 to differ. Keep the need for approval.
Thanks,
over 1.8 metres. Thank you.
Appreciate it. We've got to the finish line. Well done. Thank you. Deputation has been approved from Mr. Aldridge regarding elected members and elections. Mr. Aldridge, please come forward to make your deputation. You have up to 10 minutes.
Good afternoon, councillors, directors, Mr. Mayor. When I first came to council, I didn't really appreciate the fact that the City of Canning is a body corporate and that it's a legal entity unto itself. And the city is actually defined and controlled by the legislation that's within the Local Government Act of 1995. Now, Section 2.81D of the Local Government Act defines the role of mayor. It states the mayor speaks on behalf of the local government. It's the law. When the mayor speaks in the role of mayor, he is speaking on behalf of the local government. He is in fact speaking on behalf of the elected members who make up this council, the governing body of the local government, as per section 2.61. If the mayor uses his title to endorse a candidate in an upcoming election, the use of that title would inherently indicate that he was speaking in his role of mayor. In other words, he would be endorsing that candidate on behalf of this council and on behalf of the local government. The use of the title mayor when making that statement is absolutely indicative that the statement is being made from all of you, not just from the one person as an individual.
Can I just hold you up there for a moment, Mr. Aldridge? Governors, can I get you to stop the clock? Because I don't mind you speaking on this subject. I've got no issue with it at all, but I can't have you sitting there saying things that are patently untrue. So there was a finding made by the local, it was in relation to a local government standards panel complaint, but it was actually a finding made by the electoral commissioner in relation to elections. And in all standards and all levels of government, all the way through, the process is that any elected member can endorse anybody. That is your God-given and democratic right as a citizen of Australia. So what you're saying is, whilst you might be having your own interpretation of the Act, there's been a finding made by the Electoral Commissioner herself, and that finding is in writing, and you can search it, and it's patently contrary to what you're spruiking there. So I just think you need to be really mindful that just because you say something doesn't mean it's true.
Yes, and vice versa. As I said, the mayor, it definitely does say it in the Local Government Act. You're more than welcome to look it up. Section 2.81D of the Local Government Act does say the mayor speaks on behalf of the local government. I'm sorry, it's in there, it's part of the Local Government Act. Now, for me personally, if this council had a meeting and it collectively agreed as the governing body of the local government to endorse or promote a candidate, then I of course would have no issue with the mayor endorsing and promoting that candidate because he is speaking on behalf of the council. I of course would also not have a problem of any individual, even if he occasionally held the position of mayor, from supporting whoever he likes, as that is also his democratic right, so long as that individual did not do so in his role of mayor, because the role of mayor is clearly defined by the Local Government Act as being someone who speaks on behalf of local government. Personally, I believe that a mayor using his title to express his personal opinions is confusing for the electorate because they do not know if he's speaking from his personal point of view or from that of the entire council. In fact, the use of your titles as councillors in general is also full of inherent problems. While the Department of Local Government have in the past made it clear that it is not considered inherently improper to promote a candidate, if the promotion of one candidate disadvantages the other competing candidates, then that's a different matter because you're causing them a competitive detriment, and that could be found to be inherently improper. It is now established beyond doubt too that your @cityofcanning.gov.au email addresses are City of Canning resource. And
how has that been established beyond reasonable doubt?
It was found, it's a finding in, I think it's SP 034. It's being challenged, but the finding has been made. I can send you the paperwork. I'll send it to all the councillors if you like. So all council Facebook pages and social media should contain your @canning.gov.au email addresses to allow for the capture by City Service for correspondence sent to you in your role as councillors as required by record keeping acts. So if your councillor Facebook page contains your councillor email address and it is used for candidate promotion, then you would be indirectly misusing or potentially misusing local government property. In short, I believe that you cannot use your councillor or mayor Facebook pages to promote candidates or for any other private use. You can, of course, use your private Facebook pages as much as you like, but then, of course, these should be free of City of Canning resources anyway, or they could also be considered a misuse of the resource. What I'd really like is that there's been changes of codes of conduct, and basically from what I understand, and I could be wrong, I normally am, that at the end of the day, this council will be making decisions about breaches made by its fellow council members. I think that's inherently got problems, but I won't go into that. So what I'd really like is for CEO Kane is to receive advice from his government's team that absolutely clarifies what candidates can do and what candidates can't do, and councillors can do, and the mayor can do and can't do, especially on social media platforms, especially when it comes to the upcoming elections and the promoting of candidates. I believe that by clarifying what can and can't happen, then you'll all be on the same playing field. And I don't care what that playing field is, as long as it's known to all candidates and all candidates have an equal opportunity. And that results in one of two things. Either every councillor here can use their positions and title to promote and endorse candidates, or none of you will be able to. Personally, I think having some councillors supporting one candidate while others supported another is likely to lead to the increase of factionalism and block voting, and we know that that is detrimental to local government. Factions and block voting in the past have been the key issues that have led to the downfall of previous Canning councils, according to the Kendall report, and I believe that a clear message from Director Kane, who writes a letter to every candidate, making it crystal clear in writing what the use of government resources can and cannot be, and the use of government titles in regards to social media and promoting candidates in the upcoming election, will enable that not to happen. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. We move to item 9, applications for leave of absence. There are none. Item 10, questions by members on which notice has been given without discussion. There are none this evening. Items brought forward for the convenience of those in the public gallery. There will be none this evening. No, I'm not. The lady's left the chamber. She's left immediately after her deputation, so she has left. And the other item, we have people of interest in the chamber, is a matter that will be dealt with under confidential cover. Reports of committee meetings at item 12, there are none. Reports at item 13. The first reports are from Mr. Stephen Kane, from the Office of the CEO. There are none for that directorate. At item 13.2, the responsible officer being Director Warren Bowe, to my right, to your left, the Director of Canning Corporate and Commercial. That is in relation to CC 039 of 21, the monthly financial report for July 2021. Councillor Sweeney, you wanted to make a declaration in relation to that?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a conflict of interest. I'm actually a member of the Willetton Basketball Association, so it is my choice to leave the room, and I should be doing that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Then you need to leave the room if that's what you'd like to do. No, again, say for the sake of the record, there's absolutely no reason for you to leave the room for being a member of an organisation. Councillors, the recommendation is on page 6 of the agenda and is on screen right now. It requires an absolute majority. Can I have a mover for that item, please? So that'll be Deputy Mayor. And a seconder, please. Councillor Ponaturai. Thank you, Councillor Ponaturai. Deputy Mayor.
I have nothing further to add, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Ponaturai.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing to add at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to add anything before we put the matter to the vote? Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question, will we be separating those items which require an absolute majority or not?
I don't think there's any need to, unless I hadn't intended to. I think we're going to
it's just that there's one item I would want my vote noted, but I mean, I don't want to say no to all of them.
You can certainly put that on the record now if you'd like. I mean, you could speak against that particular item, and then it's at least noted on the record, public record. that you were not in agreement with one of the items?
Yep, that would be number 7, Mr Mayor.
Okay.
Okay, and a couple of questions. I did ask a question at the AB and it was answered in relation to the Bentley regen.
Thank you.
And just another question to follow that. I think the answer was that I asked where was the money gone. So the question I ask now, does that money, because I doubt whether we've paid it before the job is complete, does that money of the Bentley regen, is that sitting in the cash and cash equivalents of page 19 of the City Statement of Net Current Assets?
Director Bowe, are you able to answer that question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm able to answer that question. I understand that the funding within the Bentley Regen Reserve is held at Cash at Bank, but I'm happy to provide a written response to Councillor Barry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just in relation to point 7, I'm just wondering, because in point 7 it says from the community approves a budget amendment to the 2022 budget by allocating 253,000, etc., from the community sporting facility pursuant to 6.8 of the Local Government Act. Now, I'm just wondering how that works, because 6.8, it's talking about on page 11 that the expenditure comes from the municipal fund, which is not included in the annual budget. So the question I'm asking, I believe there's only $120,000 in the current community fund. So how will that work?
Director Bowe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There is a budgeted amount of, I think it's 300,000 to be transferred to that reserve over the course of the year. So that is how the funding will be accommodated within the Community Support and Facilities Reserve.
Thank you, Councillor.
So does that mean we're just going to pay that 253 out of the municipal fund?
Director Bowe.
No, that's not what I understand. I understand that the money will come from the reserve, Mr Mayor.
Well, we've only got 120,000 in there.
Director.
I might ask the CEO to answer that part, Mr Mayor.
CEO Kane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No, as part of the budget, as an allocation of some, I think it's $300,000 that comes in as part of one of the standard transfers we make. So there'll be sufficient funds in the reserve to be able to make this particular payment.
And the other question in relation to point 7 is I'm just wondering why it doesn't state that it's that sum of money is going to the Willetton Basketball Club or Association, because essentially that doesn't say what the money is being used for.
Director Bowe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In my copy of the agenda, the last line in part 7 of the recommendation reads to facilitate a loan to the Willetton Basketball Association, Inc.
And so does mine.
Which one is that? On 7?
On point 7, the last line of it says to facilitate a loan to the Willetton Basketball Association.
No, it doesn't say it on mine.
That's okay. Well, it does actually say it in there, so you okay with that?
No. Yeah. That's fine.
Okay.
So other than that, so the other question I had was that if it's 253,000, is that just the debt that wasn't paid back to the city?
Director.
And the ratepayers paid it?
Yes, that's correct, Mr Mayor.
So it's for nothing else? It's not for operational matters or anything like that?
Director.
No, it was the outstanding balance owed by the Willetton Basketball Association to the city at the completion of the construction project.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Let's put the matter to the vote. There's no need for any rebuttal. Thank you.
Motion CC-039-21 has been carried by absolute majority with 10 in favour, noting that Councillor Sweeney was absent for the vote.
That also count for mine 7, that I voted against 7?
Yes, we voted. You asked if that was going to,
Yeah,
we're going to
no,
vote
it's just
en
that-
bloc. We voted in one place. You voted in favour of it
So
all,
that-
didn't you? But you registered your disapproval with item 7, so we didn't vote separately on
that.
that.
Will show?
Sorry?
That will show?
No, it won't show. It voted that we've actually passed that motion. You asked the question. I think I was quite
Well, that's why
explicit.
I asked if you're going to split them up.
And I said, no, I hadn't intended to. But I said you have an opportunity. If all you wanted to do is register your disagreements in item 7, you can speak to that now, which you did. And at least on the public record, it will show that you were not in agreement with item 7.
Well, it
So
should
that's
show
what
that
we
I
did.
voted. It should be noted that I spoke against
It is known. You said that. I think it was
No, I know,
clear on
that's
the
why,
record.
well, that's why I'm up standing up asking the question again now.
Yep, terrific. Okay.
Mr Mayor.
Councillor Holland?
Sorry, Mr Mayor. I don't know whether we can or not now, but looking back on that motion that we just passed now, I think it nowhere is it ever going to be indicated that Councillor Barry wanted to vote against number 7.
Absolutely it will. It's on the public record. It's on the record. It's on the recording of tonight's.
On the recording, but it won't be in the minutes.
It's too late now. The matter's been. I made a ruling. The matter's been resolved, and we've actually voted. The matter is now completed. So if the matter was still open, we could probably look at it if he was not clear. Councillor Barry, governance is saying they can make a note in the minutes. You happy with that? Yeah, we'll make a note in the minutes. Thank you, governance, for the suggestion. It's a terrific idea. Item 3.3, the responsible officer is Mr Graham Bride, Director of Canning Development. It's CD 022 of 21. The report title is Initiation of Scheme Amendment number 4 to Planning, Local Planning Scheme number 42, Lot 579, in brackets number 1096, Albany Highway in St James. The officer's recommendation is on screen and also appears on page 59 of tonight's agenda. Can I have a mover for that item? Councillor Barry, thank you. And a seconder? Seconder, please. Councillor Porter, thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Barry?
Yes, Mr Mayor, no, I speak in favour of that. This is an area that the highway that's sat dilapidated for a long time. I'm not quite sure whether the development on Tennant Street is going to go ahead, but this is a shot in the arm for that major entrance into the city from Perth. So I speak in favour. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Porter, have you anything to add?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I just speak in support of this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the matter before we put it to the vote? Councillors, will put this matter to the vote. Thank you.
Motion CD-022-21 has been carried 10 in favour, noting that Councillor Ponatore is absent for the vote.
Councillors, we move to item CD 023 of 21, the title of the report being Initiation of Scheme Amendment number 5 of Local Planning Scheme number 42 for Lot 4, Fern Road, and Lot 100 and 102, Castledare Place in Wilson. The recommendation is on page 76 of the agenda and is also on screen. Can I have a mover for that item, please? Councillor Barry. Councillor Kunzer is the seconder. Councillor Barry?
Yes, I speak in favour of it. It's been 100 years in the making, so well done eventually. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kunzer, anything to add?
Yes, I speak in favour of the officer recommendation. I think it's reasonable and orderly planning by Castledare, and it provides a significant benefits to the community, most notably as staff highlight the securing of the 12 hectares of adding to the Canning River Regional Park and providing some certainty there. Also, I guess providing an avenue for more funding for the train track, which is fantastic. So I think that the proposal is something that's quite reasonable, and commend the developers for how they've come up with that, and look forward to this progressing.
Anyone wish to speak against it before I put the matter to the vote? Councillor Bain.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment. I believe governance has it at hand. Thank you.
Councillor Bain, can I just ask you first of all to read through the amendment as it appears on the screen and just confirm that that is exactly what you wanted?
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So that'll be a new Part 7. I understand you've been working with governance and the city on it and they're in agreement with it. Do we have a seconder, please, for the amendment? Councillor Sabiri, thank you for that. Councillor Bain, I'll invite you to speak to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I respectfully ask my fellow elected members for their support for this amendment to make clear Council's preference that the trees along Fern Road and the Yarrie and Chewett trees adjacent to Castledale Place be afforded the protection their significance warrants. The preservation of these magnificent mature trees located within or in close proximity to the land subject to the scheme amendment and future residential development is one of the biggest concerns amongst Wilson residents and local environmental groups. The eye-catching height, extensive canopy and age of these trees make them both iconic and natural landmarks in Wilson. They are much loved by the community who are very passionate about their preservation. The City also appreciates their importance, recommending the applicant retain all of the trees along Fern Road. The large Chewett tree adjacent to Castledale Place is a superb example of its species, which is now considered to be critically endangered on the Swan Coastal Plain. As one of the very few Chewetts left in the area, every measure should be taken to preserve it. These trees are of high environmental value, providing habitat for nesting and roosting and are a food resource for a variety of birds and insects. Their protection is consistent with the principles of our local biodiversity strategy, urban forest strategy and the fifth pillar of the sustainability policy, that is, a commitment to protecting environmental integrity and biodiversity. The intention of the letter is to ensure that the applicant has heard not only from the administration on the matter of the trees, but also the council, the elected representatives of the community and ultimate decision makers. Giving advance notice of council's position on the trees can assist the applicant in finalising and submitting a local structure plan and tree retention plan which meets council's expectations before it makes a determination on them next year. It is best to let the applicant know now of council's preference so engineering design can go ahead with a tree retention placing plan that is informed by both the administration and the council. Having such direction will afford the applicant time and opportunity to think strategically now, rather than later in the application process, and to also communicate its plans to protect the trees with the local community. Thank you to my fellow elected members for considering this amendment. I hope that it receives your support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Sabiri, have you got anything to add before we put the matter to the vote? I don't think there'll be an issue.
I'm in support of the amendment. I guess it makes clear what our expectations are when the local structure plan comes to council, and I guess it also provides some clarity around, again, point 25, where to ensure, I guess, how, and I guess again at the local structure plan, how the foreshore reserve is going to be secured and managed, and I guess the interest of the council is going to be secured. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sabiri. Councillors are only dealing with the amendment at the moment. Does anyone wish to speak against it before we put the amendment to the vote? I think we might put the amendment to the vote then, councillors. This is just for the amendment.
Amendment 1 to CD-023-21 has been carried unanimously, 11 in favour.
Thank you. The item introduced by Councillor Bain and supported by Councillor Sabiri was the new Part 7, which now has been passed by Council and becomes this part of the standard motion, which is now a new Part 7. We already had Councillor Barry move that item and spoke briefly on it. Councillor Kunza seconded the matter. Does anybody wish to speak against it before I put the matter to Councillor Bain?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, am I able to ask a couple of questions?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah.
Thank you. Just for the city, has a handover date for the Conservation River Reserve to go into the WAPC control been set yet? And if not, would it be possible to confirm with the applicant a timeline?
Director Bride.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The actual handover of the land to the West Australian Planning Commission will happen as part of the subdivision process. So that's likely to be a couple of years away. but I can certainly, we are having a meeting with the Commission on Friday, so I can certainly see if there's any firmer date, and I can pass it on to councillors.
And can you think of any other examples of similar land transactions and their possible duration? I'm happy to take that one on notice.
Director Bright.
Yeah, I'll take that one on notice to get some examples of other WAPC managed sites.
Thank you, councillors. In the absence of anyone speaking against the matter, unless somebody needs to speak in favour of it, we might just put the matter to the vote. Thank you, councillors.
Substantive motion is amended for CD-023-21 has been carried unanimously. That's 11 in favour.
Thank you, councillors. CD 02421 is the next item, the title of which is City of Canning CAT Local Laws of 2021. This item requires an absolute majority. May I have a mover for that item, please? Councillor Kunza. Councillor Holland is the seconder. Councillor Kunza.
Yes, Mr Mayor. Look, I speak in favour of the Office of Recommendation. I think everything that proposed in the CAT local law is sound. I would like to make the comment, though, that I find it a bit funny that the proposed local law is about the controlling of cats, yet the Cat Act doesn't actually allow or recognise the physical controlling of cats in the same way that the Dog Act does. And that whilst I agree that we need prohibitive areas to keep cats out of reserves and parks, if we move as a society towards making cats stay indoors, we need to recognise that they still need to get exercise. So I hope I've written to the Minister asking for it to be considered, and I hope that at some point the Cat Act is reviewed and, well, the process has started, but it's not really gone anywhere as far as I'm aware, but that provisions are included in the Act to allow or recognise that people use harnesses and leads for cats and actually have the capacity to exercise their cat. As I said in the past, there's some people that do it through Adenia Park, and there should be nothing wrong with that as long as the cat is controlled. So I hope that the Act is reviewed so that at some point we can include it in our local laws and that people are allowed to do it legally.
Thank you. Councillor Holland, have you got anything you'd like to add?
Nothing, just except that I support the motion and speak in favour of it, but I have nothing further to add.
Thank you. Councillors, does anyone wish to speak against the motion? Let's put the matter to the vote.
Motion CD-024-21 has been carried by absolute majority, 11 in favour.
Thank you, Governors. We move to CD 025 of 21, the City of Canning Fencing Local Law of 2021. The officer's recommendation is on page 100 of tonight's agenda and is also on the screen. Can I have a mover for that item, please? A mover? Councillor Barry, thank you. A seconder from the floor? Councillor Kunza. Councillor Barry, anything to add?
Nothing further to add. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kunza.
Nothing to add, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Unless there's anybody wishing to speak against the matter, let's put it to the vote.
Motion CD-025-21 has been carried by absolute majority with 11 in favour.
Thank you. We move to item CD 026 of 21. The title of the report being City of Canning Waste Local Law of 2021. The officer's recommendation appears on page 109 of tonight's agenda and is also on screen. Can I have a councillor please to move that matter? Councillor Barry, thank you. Another councillor to second it. Seconder. Councillor Sweeney, thank you. Councillor Barry.
No, I support it, Mr.
Just one moment, sorry. I think we need to read it.
Read the purpose and the effect of the local law in order to give it effect.
Oh, okay.
He's jumped in.
I think we've jumped the gun there. Sorry to interrupt you. Back up the truck. Thank you, Councillor Barry. Back to you. Apologies for the interruption. Just your microphone.
Support the officer's recommendation with the minor changes there within. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sweeney.
Nothing further to add, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. In the absence of any elected member wishing to speak against the matter, we might just put that one to the vote.
Motion CD-026-21 has been carried by an absolute majority with 11 in favour.
Thank you, councillors. We move to CD 027 of 21, Proposed Dog Amendment Local Law of 2021. The recommendation is on page 120 of the agenda and is also on the screen now. There's a preamble that I must read, and I will do so now for the purpose of the record. The purpose of the proposed Dog Amendment Local Law of 2021 is to make amendments to the Dog Local Law 2021. The effect of the proposed Dog Amendment Local Law 2021 is to correct typographical errors within the Dog Local Law 2021, including to amend the definition of authorised person, to accurately reference the fee setting sections of the Local Government Act 1995, and to remove reference to the Fencing Local Law 2021, full stop. Can I have a mover for that item, please? Councillor Holland, I saw your finger raised. Councillor Sabiri, thank you for seconding it. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I speak in favour of the motion, but nothing further to add.
Thank you. Councillor Sabiri, have you anything further to add?
No, nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you. In the absence of any councillor wishing to speak against the matter, we may put that one to the vote. Thank you.
Motion CD-027-21 has been carried unanimously, 11 in favour.
Thank you. We now move to item 13.4 on tonight's agenda, the responsible officer being Mr Ashley McKinnon on my left, the Acting Director of Canning Environment. The matter is EN 014 of 21, the title of the report being Request for Commemorative Tree, Plaque and Plinth, Policy CM 188 refers, 4 Strata Green. The officer's recommendation is on page 126 of the agenda and is currently on screen. Can I have a mover for that item? Councillor Kunza, thank you. A seconder. Councillor Sweeney. Councillor Kunza.
I'd just like to congratulate Strata Green on 20 years of operation in the City of Canning, and also for this initiative. It's actually quite interesting to look at policy CM 188, and it's not that old, and I don't think actual local businesses was part of it. It was community groups and so forth, but to actually see a local business utilise the opportunity to use to help our urban forest strategy and commemorate a significant achievement for them is great news. So well done.
Thank you. Councillor Sweeney.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, this is a terrific initiative, well supported by the deputation provided to council this evening from a local business, Strata Green, that has obviously had a long time affiliation with the City of Canning and a strong sense of belonging to Canning Vale, which is very important. So I would also strongly support this, and I'd ask my fellow councillors to do the same. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to add anything before we put the matter to the vote? Thank you, councillors. Let's put the matter to the vote.
Motion EN-014-21 has been carried unanimously, 11 in favour.
Thank you, Governance. We move to EN 015 of 21, the title of the report being Parking Control, Rhonda Avenue, Willerton, Tribute Street West in Shelley, Tudor Avenue South, Riverton, and Tomlinson Road in Welshpool. The recommendation is on page 131 of tonight's agenda and is also on screen. Can I have a mover for that item, please, councillors? Councillor Amanda Spencer-Teo is the mover. Seconder, please. Councillor Kunza. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In the interest of saving time, I'd like to move an amendment now, if I may. Sorry, Governance. Put you under the pressure.
We can do that. Have we got the amendment? Councillor Spencer-Teo, can you just have a look at that and make sure that that is exactly word for word what you hoped it might look like?
Yep, that's the one.
I'll just read it for the sake of the meeting, for the recording. that a new Part 2 be added and subsequent actions be renumbered 3 to 5, and that new Part 2 would be Council requests the CEO to review parking controls and traffic habits on Rhondda Avenue, including consultation with residents affected and consideration for parking prohibition signs to be installed on the north side of Rhondda Avenue, and provide a report to Council at the March 2022 Ordinary Council meeting. I understand that the amendment's supported by... I'll invite you to speak to the amendment. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, the amendment is supported by staff. So I've spoken to a few of the residents at the end of Rhondda Ave, and I've spent some time looking at the issues they face with parents using the street as a drop-off and pick-up area, and it is a nightmare. There have been accidents, confrontations, and residents blocked into their homes because parents have parked across their driveways. Cypress Street and Acanthus both have signs on both sides of the road. Cypress is a far smaller street, so I can see why Rhondda Avenue is popular, but nonetheless, with the upgrades to Webb Street and all the other drop-off and pick-up areas available to Rossmoyne Senior High School parents, this shouldn't be too much to ask for the safety and peace of mind of those living on Rhondda Avenue. This amendment is merely asking for the other side of the road to be considered for no parking signs in March next year. This will give residents and staff the opportunity to assess how the signs are working and to consider changes if it's determined that more are required in that period of time.
Thank you. Councillor Kunza. I had you down here as a seconder. You're waving your finger at me.
I was trying to indicate there needed to be a seconder, but I'm happy to second it.
I had you down as a seconder.
I was a seconder for the substantive.
No.
I'm happy to second it. No, look, the problems surrounding on
sorry, he had his finger up. Sorry.
On Rhondda Avenue, I mean, Councillor Spencer-Terry has said it quite perfectly. It's been causing some issues for some time, and the fact that you can still park on one side, I think that potentially need to be reviewed. So I support this amendment and ask the Council to as well.
Thank you. Does any councillor want to speak against the amendment? Yeah, of course. Councillor Barry has a question.
Yeah, so just trying to understand this. So we're going to have parking prohibitions on the south side, is that correct? And now from 3 to 5, where does that start actually? So the question I ask is that if we put these parking prohibitions in on the northern side, how much of the road will be left for traffic? Are we talking about verge, or are we talking about...
I might just refer that to Mr. Ashley McKinnon. Mr. McKinnon, I understand you may have been working with the council. Can you give some clarification of the question asked by Councillor Barry?
Councillor Barry, we'd just implement the parking controls on the south side, but would evaluate the width of the road in terms of being able to implement parking prohibitions on the northern side. At this point, it would seem to be sufficient, but we'll provide further advice once we evaluate the road and the parking over the next period till March.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Unless anyone wishes to speak against it, we might just put that matter to the vote. So this is just for the amendment, and that's to bring a report back to council in March 2022. I'll put the amendment to the vote.
Amendment 1 to EN-015-21 has been carried unanimously, 11 in favour.
Thank you. Governors, I might just ask you to put the substantive motion now up on screen. So we have a new number 2 in accordance with the amendment and a reordering of the previous items. Governance, is that that's it now? Okay, thank you. Councillor Spencer-Teo, you move the item. Councillor Kunza, you second it, the item itself, the substantive motion. Councillor Spencer-Teo, you don't have anything further to add? Thank you. Councillor Kunza, you have anything further to add? Does anyone wish to speak against this before we put it to the vote? Thank you, councillors. Let's put the matter to the vote.
Substantive motion is amended. EN-015-21 has been carried unanimously, 11 in favour.
Thank you. We move to EN 016 of 21, Sustainability and Environment Advisory Group meeting, unconfirmed minutes, June 2021. The officer's recommendation is on page 143 of the agenda and is on the screen. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Bain. Thank you, Councillor Bain. Second. Councillor Spencer Teo. Councillor Bain.
Nothing further to add, thank you, Mr Mayor, other than I support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Spencer Teo.
Nothing to add, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Let's put the matter to the vote.
Motion EN-016-21 has been carried unanimously, 11 in favour.
Thank you. We move to item 13.5, the responsible officer being Dr. Sarah McQuaid to my left. The Director of Canning Community. The item is CO 004 of 21. It's DLGSC night. It's club night lights, not nightclub lights. Sorry about that. It's DLGSC Club Night Lights grant applications. The officer's recommendation is on page 153 of the agenda and is on the screen, and apologies for that. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Spencer Teo, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Ponaturai, thank you, Councillor Ponaturai. Councillor Spencer Teo.
Thank you. I support this. The more of these that we can cross off the list, the more that can get done. So, yes, please.
Terrific, thank you. And Councillor Ponaturai.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I too second this recommendation, and I'll be happy to see more of the sports clubs all lit up and more people are out and about and being active. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the item? Let's put the matter to the vote. Thank you, councillors.
Motion CO-004-21 has been carried unanimously, 11 in favour.
Thank you. We move to CO 005 of 21, CSRFF Annual Forward Planning Funding Round 2022 to 2023. The item is on screen. It's also on page 161 of tonight's agenda. I've got Deputy Mayor Jesse Jacobs will be the mover. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Barry is the seconder. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I speak in support of this. This is exciting. This is be good to see how we submit the funding applications, and that would go, if successful, that would be help us with those two spaces that we've got listed here with the Queen's Park Open Space and Hossack Park. So I speak in support of this, Councillor. I think it's very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Barry.
Yes, similarly, Mr Mayor, I mean, I'm not quite sure. I think we did put in for this earlier on and were unsuccessful, and I would certainly hope that this one actually gets the nod, and there's also a part of the monies that will be used on the Maniana Oval side, so I speak 100% in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. You want to wish to speak to the item or speak against it? Thank you. We'll put the matter to the vote.
Councillor Barry, your vote's not recorded. Motion CO-005-21 has been carried unanimously, 11 in favour.
Thank you. We move to item 14, which is motions on which previous notice has been given. Director Warren Bowe, Acting Director of Corporate and Commercial, is the responsible officer in accordance with Clause 4.13 of the City of Canning Standing Orders. Local Law 2015, Councillor Barry has submitted the following notice of motion, and that's notice of motion 007 of 21, the title of that being all documents and correspondence relating to payment of $3,666.96 for investigative services. The recommendation is on page 174 of the agenda. Just a reminder that I've made a impartiality disclosure in relation to Notice of Motion 007 of 21 for this item. It's only an impartiality interest and I intend to stay in the room. Councillor Barry, we need a mover. Are you intending to move this item?
Yes, and if I get a seconder, I'll
Need a seconder then?
speak to it.
Councillor Sweeney. Councillor Barry.
Thank you. Surprisingly. Yes, Mr. Mayor. Look, I suppose the other thing we do know now is there is some legal advice that is attached, and it's a confidential item. Essentially, from my perspective, I have a couple of questions. First, if I may. First of all, I'd like to know, before I go into my debate, is this a case of a major or a minor breach?
Is what? What
my notice of motion relates to?
You're asking a direct question.
Yes.
About that. Well, I think the advice from the CEO has been pretty clear on that. CEO, I'll let you answer that query.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not possible for me to make any comment about the nature of this matter.
Right. Okay, I'll push on. Obviously, no sense in asking any more questions. But what I would like to say in defence of my motion, and the fact of the matter is that it is a complaint that talks about confidentiality. And first and foremost, I'd like to say that I'm aware of two councillors in the recent last couple of years who I believe had complaints made against them. And both of those ended up in the public forum. One was widely broadcast in a local rag, so I'm not quite sure how the confidentiality section works from the perspective of CM 101. And the other question I'd ask in relation to CM 101 is that still an active policy?
CEO, my understanding is CM 101 is an active policy.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Policies remain active unless they are reviewed or rescinded by council.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong and stop me if I am, the maintenance of confidentiality and respect for natural justice principles is part of that, but directly above it is also another principle which says transparency and accountability. Nowhere in the policy does it talk about private investigators. That's one thing, so I'm not quite sure why we would do that. I suppose the other things that I would like, and I think are pertinent to my notice of motion, is, and I think I mentioned the other week in relation to the Dowran inquiry, and I'll sit down for this because it'll probably be easy for me to read. There were a number of points that were made. One of them was in point 14.
Can you just tell us which, the inquiry that you mentioned, what's the
Dowran.
inquiry into?
Dowran, it was into the...
You're talking about into the Shire of Dowran?
Yes. And some of the points, and I think that are pertinent to this, is the Commission for no opinions on serious misconduct in relation to the Crime and Conduct Act. Neither the Commission nor the public sector has the jurisdiction to investigate minor misconduct and form opinions in respect of any elected official, including a local government, councils or member of parliament. Hence, that's why I asked the first question. The Commission has nevertheless decided to report to Parliament, and this is John McKechnie who's put this in. Copies of the draft were provided to the party who might be adversely affected. Where the Commission accepts the response given, the report was amended accordingly. Extensive submissions were received from lawyers acting on behalf of the President and the Deputy President. The LGA does not set out a duty on Council to check and balance on the CEO or financial reports presented to it, and Council has no responsibility for close financial oversight. 16 says these are matters of legal opinion in which the Commission fundamentally disagrees. Another one on point 20 and 21.
You've got 45 seconds left. I'm just letting you know.
Mr. Mayor, I'd ask for an extension if that's possible.
We'll wait till we get to the 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, if we stop talking, we'll be right. 20 submissions on behalf of Mr. Metcalfe to Mr. Ralph. They were the Deputy and President. Without limiting subsection, oversee the allocations of local government finances and resources and determine the local government's policies. The submission on their behalf is that the examination of the Local Government Act and regulations reveal the legislation does not contemplate the Council acting as a check and balance on adequacy or the accuracy of financial reports presented to it. This is what the President and Deputy President's legal representative is saying. Nor it is said, does the legislation contemplate for the Council being a check and balance on the financial management of the local government generally, including...
I'll just ask you to stop there because you exceeded your 5 minutes. If you wanted to put a motion to Council, you can certainly
Yes, I would like to put a motion to Council for an extra 5.
Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Ponaturai is the seconder for that. We put the matter to the vote.
It is submitted as the locally elected representative.
I'll just declare the vote yet.
I'm getting ahead of myself.
Thank you.
The motion to extend your talk
Barrett.
time has been carried unanimously, 11 in favour.
Thank you. Somebody keep the time. There is a locally members are not qualified to perform that function. The Commission has considered the submission by the lawyers on their behalf and completely rejects it. It is at odds with the Council's function to govern the local government's affairs is to ensure that there is an appropriate structure for administering the local government. Council is to employ a suitably qualified CEO, annually review the CEO's performance, and the CEO must review the financial management systems and procedures regularly, not less than once every 4 years. 25, I might leave that one. 30, I've got down VIP, so that must mean something. And the word might be wrong, the bifurcation of the responsibility may cause confusion. This is in relation to Regulation 9. Sub-Regulation 1 does not apply to any council member does as part of their deliberations, which I believe that is what we are doing now, or I'm suggesting we should do, because it's part of the deliberations and council is the authority. Mr. Martin was appointed the acting CEO following Mr. Alcock's resignation. He is very experienced and acted, and he said and asked the difference between the operational matters and the council's understanding. Their understanding was, to paraphrase, it was butt out, that's now operational. So some elected members, particularly those who haven't had any training or haven't had any widespread knowledge of local government, they may have concerns and don't know what they're dealing with. In my view, where the issues of concern relate to the governance of the Shire, elected members have a legitimate right to be involved and ask questions. They've got the power, but they don't know because they rely on the CEO to tell them what they don't know or what they need to know. The Commission is of the same opinion. 257. I might leave that because that's probably boring everybody to death. But I mean, what I would go to is, and I've mentioned this once before, it's a Lessons of Local Government into the City of Joondalup, 2005. And this is by Mr. Greg McIntyre, who was also was the Inquiry Commissioner at the City of South Perth. And he says, or it states in this document, Section 592 of the Act provides that the council or committee member can have access to any information held by the local government that is relevant to the performance of the member of his or her functions under the Act or any other written law. It also says, the panel noted that in the report of the inquiry into South Perth, City of South Perth, it was stated it is a fundamental right of councillors to seek legal and other advice provided to the city on topics they are required to make decisions on, or unless there are exceptional circumstances for this not to apply. Example being conflict of interest. 51 says the panel said that Section 592 does not cast onus on a council member to provide to the satisfaction of the administration that the information is relevant to the statutory function, but for the administration to indicate the reasons for not providing that request. Well, we haven't. I disagree with that, but nevertheless, Section 593 says it provides that it is an offence if a council or committee member makes an improper use of information. Well, I agree with that, and that's why I had the confidentiality clause in my notice of motion. However, the panel said that it would not be an infallible guide because the role of council member may, in particular circumstances, dictate a different approach to that which would apply to the inspection of information generally. 55. It is the role of the administration of the local government through the functions of the CEO to provide council members with information and access to information such as legal advice received and or local government letter of instructions for that advice in order that members can make informed decisions. Access does not necessarily mean that the member is entitled to a copy of the information, but it is able to include sight of the information and make notes thereof. The argument of the 56 says the argument of the CEO and administration would not give council member information because they believe the member may pass it on to someone else who was not entitled to it is not a valid reason for the CEO and administration to deny that council member access. Yes, indeed. So, Mr. Mayor, I mean, like I said,
Councillor Barry, that your 10 minutes is up.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Sweeney, you seconded it?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, I think for this, we need to negotiate our way through some competing priorities. I can see the balanced arguments on both sides, but for me, this is more about transparency. And when decisions are made behind closed doors, it tends to make people suspicious about whether a decision was fair or not, whether it was good use of public funds. I think we should be striving for higher standards in openness that exist at present. I've said before, we at the City of Canning, all of us should be leading and not lagging on best practice. In terms of this matter, we seem to be at crossroads with the city's need to preserve confidentiality over councillors' need for transparency for public scrutiny. If confidentiality was a concern, then in my mind, this probably should have been flagged from the outset, but it wasn't. I would have thought when it appeared in the warrant list originally, it should have been referenced in this manner. In fact, in all the follow-up correspondence, I haven't seen any reference to the issue of confidentiality, only the description of audit and assurance or investigations. So now that it has been made public in the warrant list, it becomes an issue of transparency of the decision-making processes. It is accepted transparency always has to be balanced against other interests, including the privacy of individuals. But this isn't talking about disclosing the subject of any investigation. That's not what this motion is seeking to do. I think also every decision to protect a specific interest comes to some degree at the expense of the broader public interest in being able to hold the elected members to account. So for me, this is the overriding factor, and we must be seen always to increase and not decrease public trust. So I do think there is some common ground to provide further information on the assignment and other related contractual material in relation to this matter without breaching confidentiality. So I would urge councillors to support Councillor Barry's motion in relation to this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Just a question. With the legal advice that was sought, how much did that cost?
CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just over $2,600.
Wow, okay, thank you. Anyone wish to speak? Councillor Deputy Mayor Jesse Jacobs.
Just got a question. And I've just done this question because it's more open chamber. So, question, if this passes, would a redacted invoice version be provided that would satisfy the councillor's interest while maintaining any necessary confidentiality?
I think that matter was covered in the legal advice.
You mentioned that legal advice because it's confidential.
No, but if you'd read the legal advice, it's covered in the legal
No,
advice.
but yeah, it's one thing to have legal advice, though. It's another thing to ask questions.
Director Kane, are you able to provide? No, CEO Kane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think I might be winning now, Councillor Bain, in terms of the number of times we'd get this right tonight. You asked, firstly, Deputy Mayor, in terms of this passed. This motion includes the reference all access to the above correspondence. That correspondence is quite significant, not just relating to the invoice. The legal advice makes clear that a copy of a redacted invoice is something that would be accessible to council.
Thank you. Did you want to speak to the matter, Councillor? Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, is that going to happen regardless of what happens in this motion tonight? Is a redacted version going to come out, or?
Well, at the moment, no. The motion in front of you is asking for all documents, access to everything, I think, pretty much, including correspondence.
Question for the CEO, if I may. Thank you.
CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If an alternate motion was passed that specifically requested a redacted copy, we can provide that at very short notice.
Councillor Kunta?
Just a question through you, Mr Mayor. Not for you, through you to the CEO, sorry. Section 4.13, subsection 5, subsection A of the standing orders stipulates that the CEO may, with the concurrence of the presiding member, exclude from the agenda any notice of motion deemed to be or likely to involve a breach of this local law or any other written law. Paragraph 10 basically says the effect of the notice of motion, if passed, is that it would require the CEO to breach the Act and the city's complaints management policy. In turn, this would cause the CEO to breach the city's code of conduct for employees and his own contract of employment. Such direction would be unlawful. The legal advice also provides reference to this aspect. My question is, why has it been allowed to come to council if that be the case?
CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The operative word in the standing orders is may, not will.
Councillor Barry, you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. And also from that perspective, on 9.9, it says, as this matter is raised in the notice of motion, would potentially, I mean, now we're getting into semantics like you were just saying with we or may. So,
your question?
Potentially, does that mean if the motion passes that it would be automatically ultra-virus?
CEO?
With the word like potentially.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The word potentially is used because the definition of something be ultra-virus is actually made by a court, not by a CEO. In this particular case, I've given you advice that I would be breaching the Act, I would be breaching my code of my contract of employment and therefore the city's policies. So I couldn't do that. If council were to direct me to do something that were, as a potential ultra-virus, I would have to take council's direction and go to a superior authority and say, I have been directed to do this. They would have determined it's ultra-virus. But I'm giving you advice that in all probability, and based on the legal advice, it would be.
Councillor Barry?
So reading 5.123, there is about 7 or 8 exemptions of that confidentiality. So do none of them cover any of that? That level of confidentiality?
CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Not in my view.
Deputy Mayor?
Can I propose a small amendment that it basically reads Chief Executive Officer to provide a redacted version of all documentation and electronic correspondence? So that would, I think, that's my aim, if that's possible.
CEO, I think the advice from the legal advice was quite clear on this matter. Are you able to provide some notice on that? I would think it would be improper to hand over all the information and all the emails and all the correspondence in relation to confidential investigation and simply redact out information. CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, what Deputy Mayor is proposing is a substantively different motion to the one that's currently before Council. It's open to Council to seek to move different motions, but what's proposed is not simply a minor amendment.
Anyone else wish to speak either for or against the motion? Councillor Holland.
Yeah, I've got some questions. First off, Mr Mayor. The first one is you've declared an impartiality interest. What is that? What is the impartiality?
Oh, I'm happy to tell you. I served with Shane Hogan in the Western Australian Police Force many years ago in the early and mid-1990s, and I'm not the only person sitting here who did. So I declared an impartiality because I thought that was the proper thing to do.
Good, and I just wanted to know what it was about, that was all. It was easy. The other question, where in section 5.92, where it says provides elected members should be provided with information relevant to the role, where does it say complaints against elected members are confidential? Where in the Act does it say that?
CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Act refers to complaints. It doesn't specify complaints against elected members. It refers to complaints. So in this particular case, under our own policy, all complaints which are dealt with by the city are confidential.
If they're confidential, then the results of the complaints used to be put on our website. How come they're not anymore? There used to be there's 3 on there now.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, Councillor Barry, you've got your microphone open until thank you. That's okay. Through the chair, any complaint that is done and enacted through the standards panel, where there is a finding made at the standards panel, those results are complained on the city's website.
I would say that they're not up to date at all.
I think they're up to date.
There's only 3 there. One of them a long time ago.
You're saying that you know of other standard panels?
Well, I am asking, are they up to date? Well, I'll say, are they up to date?
I think they're up to date. So only breaches go on there, of course. So if a minor breach has been found, they're the only ones that go on there. So if a matter's been dealt with and there's been found to be no breach, those are not published.
Thank you for that clarity. The other thing, could you please give advice or answer how one would go about seeking a second legal opinion on this?
CEO?
I'm not sure what the purpose of a second legal opinion would be, nor would I necessarily, I don't know off the top of my head, so I can take that issue on notice, but having sought legal advice from a well-qualified person in administrative law, that copy of the existing advice would have to be given to another party for review. But remember that the advice we've received is from someone who's qualified specifically to deal with the issues before Council.
Could you please answer my question? What would I have to do to be able to seek, which I am allowed to do? We are allowed to request a second.
You asked his advice. I think he said he
would
have to come back to it.
He just said he didn't see the point. I'm asking how do I go about doing this?
He also started by saying that I think that he would have to come back to you with that advice.
That's correct.
Councillor Holland? Yes, I'll speak to the motion now, thanks to answering those questions. I might have a couple of other ones too as we go past. What worries me about this legal advice... Are you
speaking in favour or...?
I'll be speaking in favour of the motion. I found this quite disconcerting in a lot of ways and hard to work out whether I would speak for it or would speak against it. There's so much has been redacted here. We do know that there was a complaint. It is here, Mr Hogan's invoice, with the heading redacted complaint, redacted. So it's in this advice here. Well, I'm just reading that now.
You cannot read that. It's legal advice.
Well, I can't read that. Well, then maybe can I ask why isn't this confidential? I don't like going on behind closed doors, but I think this one should be. We're coming out and saying things I don't know whether I can say.
We're being told that this is all about transparency and accountability, so why would we propose to take it behind closed doors?
Well, because the legal advice is confidential and I can't refer to it. Is that correct?
You should be able to speak to the motion. Councillor Barry has spoken to the motion. It's his motion. He's spoken to the motion without referring to the legal advice. The legal advice is what the legal advice is.
I've got the right to speak to the legal advice.
Well, legal advice is actually sealed. So
then
CEO,
I'll move a motion that this moves to confidential.
I might just ask the CEO to address your question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The notice of motion itself is not confidential. The legal advice provided is confidential. Council could move a motion to go behind closed doors if it wished to discuss the aspects of the legal advice, but the actual motion itself, which has been presented by Councillor Barry, is not confidential.
Mr Mayor, then to protect myself, I would like to move that motion because I can't refer to this and I'm quite worried now that I did that accidentally, and which would be no deliberate function of mine to do that, to breach any.
Is your intention to speak to the matter and then come back on the public record?
Yeah.
And
I should be able to ask a question regarding the legal advice, and now I can't. That's all I'm worried about.
Having said that, though, I'd make the point, since you've raised it, we have had the legal advice for some time. You've had opportunities to ask questions of the administration in relation to it and chose not to until tonight, knowing that it was confidential.
Mr Mayor, to hold my tongue here.
No, don't hold your tongue. Say what you
Okay, then I can do what I like. I got the papers here and the amendments and all the agendas and all that. We didn't get them Friday. I didn't get my hard copies Friday. I had a lot of thought and a lot of discussion between myself, trying to work out this, and now I've come to this. Normally I don't leave things to the last moment, but I've had a lot of toing and froing in my own mind. What do we do here? And now I'm asking the question here, and I will ask it.
Councillor,
and I will move the motion that this goes behind closed doors.
Can I just ask you to pause just for a moment? Governance, can I ask, can a motion without notice be put from the floor? Under what section of the standing orders are you seeking to move a motion from the floor without notice?
They can move a motion.
Mr Mayor, for open and accountability, if I wanted to speak to this legal advice, I can't. Whether there's a local law against it or not, it to me here is irrelevant. We can't
hang on a
speak
sec.
to
You can't say that breaching a local law is irrelevant. Local law is a local law. I'm just asking you to tell me where you can actually put a motion without notice to this council. That's all. You're saying that you're going to do it. I'm asking you what's your authority to do it, and if you're not sure, I'll ask for assistance. But
is government saying that I can't do this? Is that what the direction is?
We're not sure. I'm asking you.
Well, then I'm asking you.
Can I
ask governance? Can I do this?
Governance, can you please respond? Governance on the record, could you please respond? Or through the CEO? CEO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. During the course of the debate, I believe it's possible for an elected member to move a motion to go behind closed doors for discussion of matters that might relate to that, specifically in this case, the legal advice.
Are you saying that we can go behind, member may move a motion and then we can actually then move a motion to come back out and rediscuss the matter?
Yes.
Councillor Holland, you wanted to put that motion that we move this item
just so that we can discuss the legal advice
behind closed doors.
We'll put that just for this and then come out when we resume debate.
Do we have a seconder for the matter? Councillor Ponaturo is the seconder. Councillors, I think the normal provisions of debate, this is not a procedural motion, I believe, so the normal provisions of debate actually occur. Does anybody wish to speak against going behind closed doors? I will. I'll speak against it, and the reason for that is I've had a number of councillors here talk about transparency and accountability. We've had this legal advice for some time. All of us have had it. We've all had equal opportunity to ask questions of administration. If this is truly about transparency and accountability, why the hell are we going behind closed doors to discuss this where nobody can hear it on the first night of this council live streaming the audio to an audience sitting out there listening to our deliberations? We, on the basis of transparency and accountability, and those were the catch cries that led off this item, are now going to go behind confidential cover to discuss this, and no one will know what those deliberations were, despite the fact that we all had ample opportunity before this evening to raise any questions that we had with administration. I raised the point that Councillor Barry, who actually moved this motion himself, spoke for 10 minutes without any barriers and spoke eloquently and for 10 minutes on this matter without needing once to refer to the legal advice. So I would ask us to get on with it in the interests of transparency and accountability, and to debate this matter openly so that members of the public can understand the full deliberations and decision-making of this council. That is what good government is all about. So I would hope, even if you had decided to support Councillor Holland's motion, that on hearing those words you may decide to not support it. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Ponaturai.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just speaking to the item why we are going behind doors. Just purely the reason, the legal advice given to us, front of us, it's confidential item, and we are not supposed to breach a code of conduct at any time. And like most of the other councillors, I'm definitely, yes, I totally, more than 100% believe in transparency, and I'm happy to see that my motion, which I brought you to go transparency and live, which is going audio today, and people might be listening, but we all believe in the transparency and accountability, but at the same time, we also hold the confidential information that we should not breach the code of conduct. So we need to respect the legality of that too. So that's when we want to speak closed door, unless it was given to us as an open and given to everybody as an open item. And to be honest, which is a very small dollar amount, why wasn't even transparent? Firstly, that's my question, but I'm happy to just speak about this. Why even that's difficult. So I wanted to make a correction, if anybody's listening, that more than 100% I believe, and who even brought this motion that everyone should be listening, but because this particular legal advice is confidential, so we wanted to respect that as well. Thank you.
In the absence of anyone wishing to speak against Councillor Holland's motion, there might be just Councillor Holland, you're entitled to rebut. Or we can
you spoke against it. You spoke against it, Mr. Mayor.
That's right.
And I will remind my fellow councillors that it was mentioned of my party's rebuttal. It was mentioned that we can't debate openly, that we need transparency, and people need to be able to hear our deliberations. Well, we can't. I am now holding the confidential legal advice. We can't debate that openly anyway. So whether it's transparency or not, we can't talk about it. We can't discuss it. So this transparency or open debate here is not the issue here. So everybody can hear our deliberations. They can't hear any deliberations because we can't have deliberations on the legal advice. They can't hear our debate on the legal advice because we're not allowed to have debate on the legal advice. So having it open and transparent in this issue is not there because it won't happen. Because we're not allowed to talk about it. So where's the open and accountability and transparency there? To our ratepayers, who we paid $2,600 or whatever dollars it was for this, and we're not allowed to discuss it. And I want to go home, behind closed doors, where it is the only forum we can discuss it. The only forum. And talking about transparency and everything else, we've asked, Councillor Berry's asked for documents to be given to us, and they said no because it's confidential. That's what this whole thing's about. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, let's put the matter to the vote.
The motion to go behind closed doors for a confidential session has been carried. 8 in favour, 3 against, with councillors Kunza, Spencer-Teo and the Mayor voting against the motion.
Thank you, councillors. Just for the sake of the recording, I'll just, for the audience at home, I will just make a comment that we will be coming back. We will be reconvening the live audio governance. Is that the case? We will be live streaming it. Stay in your chair, please. We don't need to leave. We will be live streaming again as soon as the confidential matter has been finalised. I'll ask members of the public to please leave the chamber. We will come. Okay, thank you. Just for the purpose of the record and the audio streaming, it's just after 8:30 p.m. Council has had a discussion behind closed doors in relation to some legal advice provided to it. Councillor Holland has moved to actually come back to chamber to openly discuss the item that was supported by Councillor Barry and resolved by council unanimously. So the meeting now commences. A number of members of the public have re-entered the room, and we continue with debate. Councillor Barry, you have spoken at length. Councillor Sweeney, you have spoken. Councillor Holland, you have spoken. Who else spoke? No, you asked questions. Deputy Mayor, you had your... You were only asking questions, I think, weren't you? Did you want to speak to it now? Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just clarify another question, which I just want totally clarified in my mind. If I was to put a motion, CEO, to seek a second opinion, would that be irrelevant to this, considering that you've said that you cannot give out that information anyway, regarding whatever the legal advice says? Is that correct?
CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure I can't give out the advice. I certainly, if council were to move a motion seeking a second opinion, then I'd be obliged to get a second opinion, and that advice, as per the first advice, would be provided to council.
Sorry, I didn't word that very well. That's not what I meant at all. What I meant is, regardless of whether what legal advice was given, are you saying that you cannot disclose this information anyway because you would be in contradiction to your employment contract or so on? If you could just please reiterate that in the
CEO, can you just provide
terms?
clarity around Section 3 of your employment contract?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and consistent with the advice contained there from the lawyer, I would be in breach of my contract of employment if I disclosed any matters relating to this, specifically in regard to breaching the city's policy CM 101 and the way we deal with complaints, and the Local Government Act.
Is that from the advice that we received that you're saying that, or is that because that's exactly what's in your contract and how the Local Government Act goes as far as the CEO goes?
CEO.
Thank you. That's both, because I checked my contract of employment before I came in this to see what I could and couldn't do, and I'm quite clear that I can't.
My last little bit, Mr. Mayor, so we can get on. So that would mean if I said let's go and get legal advice, and we got legal advice from XYZ chambers, and they disagreed with the legal advice we've got from ABC chambers, you still couldn't give out that divulge the information anyway. Is that what I'm understanding?
CEO?
Thank you. You have legal advice before you, which is I can't give that out. If there were you're asking me a hypothetical now because I don't know whether there could be a contradicting legal advice given the expertise that's involved by the gentleman who's provided this. But based on the advice here, I can't provide that information.
Councillor Holland?
Yeah, it's funny when we've got legal opinion from QCs on certain matters, and the people we are going up against have got legal opinions from QCs on the same matter, and they differ. And that's QC level. This is not QC level. Okay. So I'm going to put I'd like to put a motion through that. I would like a secondary legal opinion, please. And would you please explain how I'd go about asking for that?
Yeah.
And then, well, I think we would have to suspend this until we got the...
You have to foreshadow.
How do you do
You would
that?
have to... So all you would do then is to foreshadow a motion. So in the event that this is not supported, that we would then go back and get a second legal opinion. That would be a foreshadowed motion because it's got a different intent. Councillor Barry?
If somebody moved a procedural motion to defer
You've already spoken on the matter. I don't think you can actually speak.
It's a question.
So you're trying to prompt somebody to put a procedural motion?
I'm only asking that because I've already spoken.
Okay.
That one procedural motion behind closed doors.
Would it be appropriate for somebody to move a procedural motion who hasn't spoken in relation to whatever Councillor Holland was talking about?
You don't think this matter should be, decision should be made tonight by council? I mean, how much
I'm
more
not
information
debating
do we
it. I'm
need?
not debating it, Mr Mayor.
No, you asked me whether it was
No, no,
appropriate. I
Yeah.
can't tell you whether it's appropriate. Of course, any councillor can actually put a motion
Well-
to adjourn it.
So can we let
But-
it lay there? I don't want to debate anymore.
Well, it sounds like you are debating it.
No,
It
no,
sounds
no,
like you're trying to.
not at all.
Councillor Kunza?
If a council member was to move a procedural motion to adjourn it, what would actually compel the CEO to seek further legal advice in that motion? I don't quite understand what he's alluding to.
Well, that is a very good point, CEO. There's nothing to compel you at the moment.
In fact, Mr Mayor, a simple adjournment simply brings the matter back before. I've already spent city's resources to provide legal advice. You have to presume that I have confidence that the legal advice provided by a suitably qualified practitioner is sufficient for council to make a decision on this.
Councillor Spencer-Teo?
Just a question. Sorry, we seem to be in the habit of asking hypotheticals. If you hadn't have received the legal advice, sorry, through you, Mr Mayor, to the CEO, would you still have an issue releasing this on your own experience and your own qualifications? You would still feel that you were in breach of your employment contract by releasing this?
CEO.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And prior to actually seeking legal advice, I checked thoroughly the city's policies because I had to frame the legal advice as to what it related to, the Section Act and also my contract of employment to see how I stood in this matter so that I would know. And yes, I would be in a breach if I were to do that. Now, all the legal advice did was confirm what was my belief, but it did it from a fully qualified practitioner with expertise in administrative law, something I don't have.
I'm going to speak to the matter. And I think I should. We've had a number of questions here, but I'm going to speak strongly in opposition to this matter. And the reason is that in my belief, it's not about transparency at all, it's about the law. Councillor Barry states in his preamble the notice of motions about scrutiny and a duty to the ratepayer, and I really wonder whether that's the intent of this. I'm actually really disheartened by this motion. I think it's quite outrageous that we've spent $2,500 so far of ratepayers' money chasing down a legal opinion on a matter that was only valued at $3,500 on the basis that councillors here, Councillor Barry, will not accept, and Councillor Jacobs as well, because both of them have actually asked the CEO to release the information.
I'm the Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Deputy Mayor. Both of those officers, those elected members, have actually requested this information to be released. Former CEO has refused to do so and given grounds not to do so. That advice was dismissed. They again went to the new CEO, or Councillor Barry certainly has, and has sought him to release it again. This CEO Kane, one of the most experienced CEOs in Western Australia, has actually also dismissed that and given good reason for not doing so. The city has then spent $2,500, $2,600, which will not be invested in playgrounds in the city of Canning, will not go to grant funding to local community groups, and now we have councillors speaking about getting a second opinion and spending more thousands of dollars on that. I want to make it patently clear that this council is being put by Councillor Barry into an incredibly perilous position, and I ask all of you to think very, very carefully about what you do with this matter tonight. If the motion is supported by this council, council will be intentionally committing potentially an unlawful act. And I say intentionally because you have a legal opinion in front of you that tells you that to keep chasing this rabbit down this hole may potentially be an unlawful act. Section 3.2E of CEO Kane's contract of employment signed in 2021 states, and I've asked the CEO if I can share this, he must, underline the word must, comply with the city's policies and procedures, including the Code of Conduct. Section 7 of his contract says to not do so are grounds for dismissal. Tonight you're asking him to breach the provisions of his own employment contract. Councillor Barry's motion asks CEO Kane to breach confidentiality provisions of the City of Canning policy, which is found in CM 101 complaints management. We've already discussed that tonight. I would raise with you that The Local Government Model Code of Conduct Regulations 2021, which are regulations, this is the law, state in Division 3, a council member or committee member, but irrelevant here as a council member, must, not maybe, shoulda, coulda or woulda, must comply with all policies. To not do so would be a breach of that regulation. If the matter concerning Hogan's invoice relates to a local government standards panel matter, and we believe that may not, Section 5.123 of the Local Government Act states, and Councillor Barry may have a differing opinion, it states, a person to whom this subsection applies commits an offence if the person discloses information that the complaint has been made or any information about any detail of the complaint. So redacting it doesn't make one iota of difference. To disclose any detail of a complaint, even the fact that a complaint has been made, is a breach. It's an offence under the provisions of Section 152 of the Corruption, Crime and Misconduct Act of 2003 for a person to disclose any information to which this section applies. The penalty is 3 years imprisonment and a fine of $60,000. Now, we don't know whether or not this is in relation to a matter before the CCC, but what we do know is that the CCC, the Corruption and Crime Commission, is currently investigating a complaint made of them of serious misconduct concerning this council. Further, Section 8.2b, I'll just reiterate, of the Local Government Model Code, as I mentioned, states a council member must comply with all policies. The advice that we've received, the legal advice, is patently clear. The report to council tonight is patently clear. If you individually or we as a council vote in favour of this, you are voting to put the CEO in a position where he may commit an unlawful act. Councillor Barry raised a report tonight regarding Darwin. I want to raise one in regards to the Kendall report. Before I do, though, I will say that my 5 minutes has expired, and I'll ask council for a further 5 minutes. I put a motion that I be provided with the same provision as Councillor Barry and be provided with an extra 5 minutes to speak. Seconder, please. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillors will put the matter to the vote.
The motion to extend Mayor Hall's debate time to another 5 minutes has been carried unanimously. 5 minutes.
So in relation to panel inquiries, I refer to the panel inquiry of the City of Canning in 2014, known as the Kendall Report. On page 360, Dr Kendall comments, a significant element of distrust or lack of faith shown by the council towards the administration. Dr Kendall further reported on page 360 that there was no justification for the council effectively taking over certain administrative functions or decision makings, or, importantly, failing to rely on the expertise of the administrative staff. Isn't that what we're doing? We've been provided advice. We're failing to actually rely on it. Dr Kendall finished by stating on page 363 of the report, I am unable to conclude that council in its present configuration and administration are likely to ever be able to exercise good government for the persons of the City of Canning District. The attitudes of many of the individual councillors seem entrenched over many years, and based on the evidence before me, I cannot see them changing significantly. That council, of which Councillor Graham Barry was a member, was suspended in 2012 and ultimately sacked in 2014. And here we are 7 years later, and it seems if we refer to the findings of the Kendall report, the lessons of the past may not have been learned. Deputy Mayor Jessie Jacobs and Councillor Graham Barry seem very interested in seeing what this confidential information, this investigation is all about. Both have emailed the city's CEO, as I earlier reiterated, and they want pretty much full and unfettered access to all documentation and electronic correspondence. Councillors, you will have read the legal advice provided to you tonight. My only regret is that it will not be made public, and residents will not be made aware, and those listening tonight will not be made aware of the unequivocal nature of that legal advice. That advice, which cost ratepayers more than $2,500, would not have been required if only Councillor Barry and perhaps Deputy Mayor Jessie Jacobs had simply accepted the advice of the city's appointed Chief Executive Officer. That's his role. At a time when our community are well aware that this council is being investigated by the Crime and Corruption Commission, and residents are looking to us to demonstrate leadership and to provide good government, the last thing that this council should be doing tonight is to support a notice of motion which may direct the CEO to commit an unlawful act. And that exact scenario is outlined in paragraph 10 of the report in front of you all. I strongly urge council to not endorse the notice of motion put by Councillor Barry, as the implications of doing so could be catastrophic to this council's image, which is already, I think, tarnished, and the professional reputations of each one of us. I would also, in closing, just say that I do not agree that this matter should be adjourned. We have all of the information in front of us tonight to make an informed decision, and I think our community and those many residents who are live streaming for the first time and hearing the deliberations of council tonight. Councillor, you're passing notes. Can I ask what those notes are about? Can I ask you to read the note to council?
Just, I vote for the adjourn. You just mentioned that's all I'm writing.
Thank you, Councillor Ponaturai. That we should be dealing with this matter tonight. We have all of the information in front of us. We have a legal advice from a senior member of the legal fraternity who I have no doubt, as a principal officer of that firm, is an appropriate person to be providing that advice. We have the officer's report. We have all of the information in front of us, including each one of those precedents that I've outlined in front of you. But the most compelling of this is the CEO's own contract of employment. If we are to force him tonight to do what he is unwilling to do, we will effectively be giving ourselves grounds to dismiss him. And that would be outrageous. That would simply be outrageous. So I'm asking this council, regardless of whether you spoke in favour of Councillor Barry's motion previously, please hear what I've said. I'm asking you, in the interests of good government and good governance, to do what our residents are requiring us to do, and that is to act in good faith and to protect the sanctity of confidentiality around a process that none of us know about. A lot of assumptions have been made tonight about what this could or could not be, but we should just leave that alone right now, because this council does not need to know everything that happens in the city, and especially in regards to confidential matters that are governed by policy. If at some later stage this council resolves to change the policy and to not make those matters confidential, well then somebody should put that matter to council and that will be debated. But right now we have a policy, and the law requires, the regulations require us to abide by that policy. End of speech. Thank you. Councillor Spencer-Teo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd also like to speak against this motion. There seems to be a lot of confusion with regards to confidentiality and this council. If I look at this as if I was a party to the complaint, whether I be a member of staff or an elected member, I'd have to ask myself, is mine or anybody else's right to confidentiality under the law any more important than a few elected members and some in the public gallery's curiosity? My answer is yes. Upholding the law and the rights of a person who's party to this complaint is far more important. For that reason, I will not be supporting this nom. I believe it's an overreach of our positions as elected members. This is not relevant to the functions of our roles. And I certainly will not be complicit in breaching confidentiality, or worse yet, breaching the Local Government Act. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor wish to speak? Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll speak to this motion, but I will make mention that I would like a foreshadowed alternative motion, which will have two components. One will be that redacted version be made available, and a second, point two, a second legal opinion is obtained to be brought back to council when ready.
You'll have to just wait a moment for governance to be able to put that on the screen so councillors can at least look at it. So.
Even if council. Detailing all the aspects.
The CEO is saying, CEO, I might get you to just provide that information. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And Deputy Mayor, I would not be able to provide a redacted version of the email, even if Council were the legal advice of Council would direct me to do so, because as noted, it contains all the details of the complaint that was looked at by the legal advisor, and in doing so, I'd be effectively back where I was now, breaching and providing those details to Council.
Do you want to speak to the motion,
Yeah,
Councillor?
so my logic is...
Are you speaking for or
I'm
against?
speaking for it.
Wow, okay.
I'm speaking for it, and the logic is that the CEO, if he's obviously got his considerations, and he will do what he needs to do. So I'm speaking for it.
Excuse me, just a moment, CEO.
Just a clarification, as Director Bowes pointed, Deputy Mayor, were you referring to, as I understood, you referred to a redacted copy, an unredacted copy of the legal advice being provided to you?
A second legal opinion, and that can be confidential. I don't want it out in the open. It doesn't need to have it out in the open. So we just want a second legal opinion because lots of big things, sometimes you need a second legal opinion, as you need a second opinion with medical things too.
No, it's through the chair, there's a redacted version. Were you referring to the redacted version of the legal advice or the redacted version of the
two
invoice?
things. One, so if you look at the Councillor Barry's motion, I'm just adding in a redacted version of the whole...
of everything.
Yeah, well, if you could go up a little bit, I can...
You want exactly the same wording as Councillor Barry's, but you want you want it to be redacted.
A redacted that satisfies our legal requirements, but also, in a sense, satisfies Council's interest in this matter. And this would not be different to maybe perhaps some advice that we've received.
I think the CEO is making the point that he cannot provide that redacted information. CEO?
Through the chair, and I can provide a redacted version of the invoice, but only the invoice and nothing else. If I were to try and give you a redacted version of everything else, I'd simply have every single line on all those documents redacted. You'd have pages and pages with nothing on it. It'd be like talking to the CIA. This is, I can give you, and as per the legal advice, a redacted version of the invoice, but that is the extent to which I'm able to provide any redacted.
The CEO can provide that redacted copy of the invoice to Council without a motion. I think we can do that. That can be distributed to councillors. There's no issue with that. It's on the public record, and the CEO's agreed to it, so would that satisfy?
When could we perhaps see that, and what's to stop just getting a black pen and just blacking over everything and saying, here's a redacted copy?
That's what a redacted copy is, that all relevant information is actually stripped away from it. What is the information that you're seeking? You want the information about what the investigation is? Is that what it is? Because the redacted account will have Shane Hogan's name, his licensed investigation thing, whatever that is, and the name of his business, and the amount. And that's pretty much what was in the warrant list. It's not going to tell you what the investigation was for.
Well, that would be better than what we've got now, which is nothing.
I'm not sure that it will be any better than what you have now, or better than nothing. But certainly, as the CEO has just agreed to, he will tomorrow. You able to do that tomorrow?
It'll have to be on Friday because I won't be. I've got other matters to do with tomorrow, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
But my only question is that, I mean, a redaction. I mean, a legal opinion would be good because otherwise you just get a red black pen and go through everything. The second legal opinion might say, actually, it might be. So I think
you can't speak to the matter. You've got a foreshadowed motion there. You can't speak to it.
It's the motion will be that we get a second legal opinion, a confidential legal opinion on this.
So your foreshadowed motion is you need to give us the wording for it, Deputy Mayor. So you need to provide the wording. What's the wording?
That council seek a second legal opinion to be a second legal opinion, confidential legal opinion to be obtained and brought to council when ready. And then I'll just leave everything else as is at the moment.
I'm not sure it needs to say if the motion under debate was lost, because that's what a foreshadowed motion is, isn't it? An alternate motion.
Has moved an alternate foreshadow seeking a second legal.
Holland didn't raise that.
Councillor Potatoy.
Did Councillor Holland move the second legal opinion or advice?
He was asking questions in relation to it, but I don't believe
Well,
he actually
I
moved,
can't see
moved
that.
a foreshadowed
Okay.
motion.
Yeah. Where? No, that was to bring the confidential item.
You've gone past it. It's on the last page.
Not that. Councillor Holland advised he would foreshadow an alternative motion to obtain a second.
Okay, so that's already there. Okay, terrific.
But did somebody second and moved? Or
You don't need to second and move it, councillor. It's a foreshadowed alternate motion. Deputy Mayor, do you wish to speak for or against the motion?
I'll speak for it because I think I've listened to we're listening to various arguments, and everyone's obviously entitled to their opinion. The argument that was prosecuted against this is that the legal opinion is a waste of ratepayers' money, but by the same token, the $3,666.96 ratepayers' money that's also true. So I'm happy to support it. And I'm sure that because we don't want the CEO and everyone will do what they need to do legally, but I think it's I'm looking at this motion and I'm saying I think it's a step in the right direction, because we've got to work out what was the context, what was the process, and I mean we can't say too much, but that's just basically my thinking at the moment, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else want to speak? Councillor Kunza.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I very much speak against the notice of motion. The CEO will do what he needs to do legally. You just spoke in support of a motion that the CEO has said, that's backed up by legal advice, that it is unlawful for what you're asking him to do. But the CEO will do what he needs to do legally. That's quite dumbfounding. I just don't understand how we can sit here with members speaking in support of this notice of motion, where it's not just the CEO stating that he can't do what's been asked, and that we would be actually asking the CEO to breach the Act and breach the city's complaint management policy, backed up by legal opinion, but members are still speaking in support of this. Now, I've said this in the past, where members talk about what they actually want, but it's not what's on the screen. When we endorse motions saying, no, I actually meant this, but that is what the motion reads. That is what the motion reads, and that's unlawful. So don't speak about the CEO will interpret as he wants to, or the CEO will do A, B, C. That is what we're telling him to do. And that is a decision of council if this was to be passed. How could we do that? Now, going back what feels hours ago, a lot of the inquiry into Dowran was used as justification for this. Now, the big things, I haven't read the report, but from what I understand, the major takeaways of the inquiry into Dowran was that they didn't have the policies and framework in place, and that was fraud. That they didn't even have an audit committee. Direction was, or recommendations was made that's gone through the sector. We already have the policies and framework in place. We have an audit and risk committee. Just 2 months ago, they provided a report that Councillor Barry's passed the motion, actually, I believe, that goes through all the different audit plans that we have, the internal audit reviews. One of them, ironically, is the whistleblower hotline that's ongoing, and it's making sure that the city has provision if there's a whistleblower. And if they make a complaint, that it's supposed to be kept confidential. And here we are, looking at a motion against legal advice to try to make it all public. That's not just to make the redacted invoice public, it's to make everything. How on earth are we having this discussion for so long? I don't understand it. Our job, the Darren findings isn't that we ask for every single piece of material when it gets provided to us. It's about council making sure the framework and policies are in place to detect fraud. Not so that we ask for confidential information. If the decision or the advice is that we should not have it, and that's backed up by legal opinion, how on earth we can make a decision that goes contrary to that? Now, I really hope council doesn't do that. I really hope council understands there's a difference between what you want and what emotion says. And I hope that council votes against this because, I mean, as the mayor said, there's a bit of a spotlight on us already, so why on earth would we want to add this into it? I'll be voting against it, and I hope you all do too.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak? Councillor Porter.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I had a couple of questions. So with this one, is it just the CM 101 that's not allowing the CEO to provide the information? And if so, can we amend the motion to change CM 101 to allow the information to be provided?
I think the first part of the question is it's not the only reason. It would be to do with your contract of employment. CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, it's not the only reason. There's again confidentiality provincial principles under the Local Government Act, Section 123, relating to complaints means that I can't breach the confidentiality provisions where there is a complaint. Council has adopted policy CM 101, which is the guidance on how we should deal with all complaints. That policy is also clear and it says that all complaints should be dealt with in the interest of natural justice and to provide confidentiality. So I don't believe it's suddenly open to a council to seek to, at this juncture, to suddenly amend its own policy in order to get something which would also be contrary to the Local Government Act.
Councillor Porter.
And my other one's more just one out of curiosity. So with this one where pretty much it's an unlawful request of the CEO, so if we did that, would the CEO be able to find a lawful way to provide the information as a direction from council? Like having a motion come before us to change the policy so that he could provide it without it breaching his contract?
CEO?
No.
Thank you.
Breaching the Act.
Councillors, anyone else before we put the matter to the vote? We'll go back to Councillor Barry, who moved it. Councillor Polonturoi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to clarify, we are just speaking on for the second opinion?
No, we're talking to the
No,
motion.
the whole substantial, okay. I'm very confused and very tired. My brain's working. Only reason, probably not telling you whether I'm voting yes or no at the moment, but we speak about transparency and good accountability, which is true. How does our ratepayers know that we don't have the full document in front of us? We are only just going with like half-blind information. Because they don't know that because it's under confidentiality. So that's my question, because yes, we want to be fair by the people who have elected us to make the decision here on behalf of them. And so we are here representing them. But when part of the information is not given to us, how do we make the decision? So that is what is getting in my head, and I am still staying puzzled. I'm not here to make anyone look bad or good or anything, but we are here to do a job. But how do they know that we made this decision with only be able to see half the document?
Because they're all listening to you right now. Well, not all of them, but I guess a substantial number are listening to us right now. So we have a warrant listing, every week, and I guess we always deal with information, but this is different. You've asked the question, so I'll answer it. This is different because there's a number of regulations and matters at law which are addressed in the legal advice and also in the report in front of you that tell you that it would be unlawful to release that. That's not the case when we ask about a lawn mowing contractor or a printer contractor on the warrant listing. But in this particular instance, it's about breaching a policy, potentially breaching acts of parliament, of regulations. So when you say how will your question was, how will people know that we've got all the information? Well, we have all the information for this particular matter in front of us, and we make decisions based on what we have in front of you. And in front of you right now is all the information you need to make the decision on this particular item.
Yeah, but half the documents been redacted.
Why would you need the documents to make a...
Because it's a legal opinion we asked for. So, and I genuinely feel, yes, the invoice is only 3,600, but we already spent nearly more than 2/3 of the money for legal advice, and I feel absolutely sin, especially when we're having such a big deficit in our budget, in operational budget, to be spending more money. But at the same time, how do I stay transparent? So that's why I'm totally feeling confused and not able to make a decision. And I absolutely feel horrible as Mr. Mayor. So, okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. Councillors, in the absence of anyone else wishing to speak, I might ask Councillor Barry to close, and then we'll put the matter to the vote. Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, just to answer a couple of questions. I mean, I don't recall we ever said anything about whistleblowing, unless somebody's got some other information that they've heard. This was not, I think as one councillor Holland said, this is not legal opinion, it was legal advice. As for my notice of motion asking the CEO to break the law, on the contrary, it wasn't. Similarly to Councillor Holland, this hard copy was not made available to me till yesterday afternoon, so there is no way that I was saying that. In relation to what you said, Mr. Mayor, about the Kendall inquiry, well, yes, it was like I say, a very harrowing experience, but by the same token, please remember that all things said, not one councillor of that era or in that inquiry had a finding, criminal, minor breach, anything against them. In fact, in actual fact, I'm not quite sure of the page number, but we're around 353 where Chris Kendall was quite complimentary to me. So we'll put that where it sits.
In relation to your testimony about as a
Exactly,
witness.
that I was a good councillor and I worked on behalf of the ratepayers, and he complimented me on that, not in a derogatory fashion. The other thing which worries me, and it has been brought up, is that this was sitting in a warrant listing, and I'm sort of concerned to the extent, well, I don't know how you would make it confidential, but now, as I think Councillor Sweeney had said, that confidentiality of this has now come to the fore. In relation to section 5123, I did mention that there were 7 exemptions, so I don't know, that wasn't covered in any legal advice as to how it may affect it. Yes, I understand the officers are experts in their field, but we do not go ipso facto on officers' recommendations. A lot of officers' recommendations are lost. So to say that is patently wrong. The other thing that I was mentioning once before is that it doesn't say in any advice, or it says in the bottom back of this one, that it's a potential breach. Well, potential and the real thing, they're 2 different things. And the other thing that I put forward was that what I have said in my rationale was 2.72A. Yes, I believe that is what it should have been. 592, 13.1, there's just so much there. This is the level of scrutiny that council should be doing, like it was said in the Dowram one, where you had the likes of John McKechnie. Now, I mean, these guys are not dummies. These guys are not dummies. And they're telling the elected members there.
Councillor Barry, you're
us,
introducing new argument.
No, I'm not.
Well, you are. I can't remember anyone raising that name. I'm not sure why.
Well, I did. And
you just did then.
Yes.
You can't rebut yourself.
I'm not rebutting myself. I mean, it's just, well, if you're going to say it, you can say I'm being repetitive, but that's about it. but I mean, I've only
You
said
can't
it
be
once.
repetitive, you can only rebut. You're in rebuttal at the moment.
McKechnie said, basically, that we as councillors should have oversight, particularly from the financial regs 1996. Now, like I said, I haven't invited the CEO into any sticky web that he has to prostitute himself with any sort of information that he's not likely to have. Whether we get a second opinion is another for another person. I mean, essentially, I'm saying that we need that information. What it's turned into, it's morphed into something, the monster. From what it was, a simple answer. If somebody had said, "Well, look, it's really just this," it might have said to everybody, "Well, yeah, don't bother." But we've let it fester, and that's the problem for me. So I don't know how it works, but I mean, obviously, I'll be supporting my own motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, let's put the matter to the vote.
Motion nom-007-21 has been lost. 3 in favour, 8 voting against. Those voting against, the Mayor, Councillors Bain, Holland, Kunza, Ponathurai, Porter, Sabiri, Spencer-Teo.
Thank you, councillors. The matter has been lost. We had a alternate motion there in relation to legal advice. Councillor Holland, did you want to proceed with that alternate motion, considering what's just occurred?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I think that was quite emphatic. I can't see the point.
Okay. Thank you, councillors. We'll move on. We move on to the confidential matter. Confidential matter, can I have a mover and a seconder that this item, which is CCO 4021, be dealt with behind closed doors? That would be Councillor Barry. Thank you, Councillor Barry. Councillor Bain is the seconder. Councillor Bain, thank you. Can we put that matter to the vote that we go behind closed doors?
Motion to go behind closed doors has been carried. 10 in favour. Councillor Ponathurai absent for the vote.
Sorry?
Staff know about dinner, we'll have a retracted.
Yeah, it could be another little while. Councillors, we will just wait until we've governance to close the door. Who was that? Who's he? No. Just a member of the public. Okay. Thanks, councillors. Let's move right into this. Thank you, councillors. I'll just thank you, councillors. We are now back in open chamber. For those listening at home, for the sake of the public record, we have been dealing with a confidential matter behind closed doors. We have made a decision as council. Council has resolved the following. I might just read it straight off the board. The item was, the title of the item was Proposed Disposal of Portion of Lot 326 Hartfield Street in Queen's Park, known as Hartfield Park. Of the council's recommendation is, and governors, I'll just get you to scroll through, please, as I read. Is that not right?
No, it was 405. Yeah. They were the amendments. Yeah, that's right.
I think I'm fine. I'll read off what I've got in front of me. Councillors, thank you. The council's decision is that in the office, that council, in accordance with section, and this is item 1, in accordance with section 3.58 of the Local Government Act 1995, authorises the CEO to provide local public notice of the proposed sale of a 485 square metre portion of 46 to 50 lot 326 Hartfield Street, Queen's Park, to Turkish Islamic Association of Western Australia for the consideration of $195,000. 2, subject to there being no objection received to Part 1, authorises the CEO to undertake all necessary actions and sign all documentation to complete the land transaction. Should objections be received, the matter shall be referred back to the next available ordinary council meeting. 3, in accordance with section 6.8 clause 1B of the Local Government Act, approves a budget amendment to the 2021-2022 adopted budget to allocate an expense line item of $20,000 funded from the city's Land, Building and Development Reserve for expenses related to the land administration and transactions referenced in this report, including the finalisation of the sale of portion of 46 to 50 in brackets lot 326 Hartfield Street, Queen's Park, with any unused funds returned to the reserve. 4, upon finalisation of the land sale, authorises the allocation of the proceeds of sale, in brackets, minus any expenses incurred, close brackets, to the Land, Building and Development Reserve. And 5, requests the Chief Executive Officer prepare a scheme amendment report for consideration at or prior to the November 2021 Ordinary Council meeting to rezone the subject 485 square metre portion of 46 to 50 Lot 326 Hartfield Street, Queen's Park, from public open space to residential R30. Request the Chief, and item 6, request the Chief Executive Officer to prepare a scheme amendment report for consideration at or prior to the November 2021 Ordinary Council meeting to rezone Lot 5, in brackets, Lot 414, Godfrey Street, Queen's Park, from residential R30 to public open space. And 7, requests the CEO to develop a concept plan for the expanded Godfrey Park, incorporating Lot 414 Godfrey Street, Queen's Park, for consideration as part of the 2022-2023 budget, which A, identifies tree planting numbers to offset the potential canopy loss subsequent to the disposal of portion of Lot 326 Hartfield Street, Queen's Park, and B, incorporates the planting of suitable tree species, including mature native trees, to enhance the Queen's Park biodiversity corridor identified in the city's local biodiversity strategy. And finally, C, identifies the location of the renewed playground equipment and other public open space enhancements at Godfrey Park. And that matter was resolved. We required an absolute majority. That was achieved. Governors, can I get you, for the sake of the record, to read those for and against? I think the call was 8-3.
Correct, Mayor. The vote was 8 in favour, 3 against, with councillors Holland, Kunza and Sweeney voting against the motion.
Thank you, councillors. The time now is 10:25 p.m. and the meeting has, of course, been reopened to the public. There being no further business, I now declare the meeting closed at that time and would like to thank everybody for their attendance.